Hello, welcome to this YouTube channel 10 Mangaverse. Enjoy the video.
Our story begins with Brave New World, known as BNW for short. This game, a virtual reality open-world MMORPG, boasts the largest scale in gaming history. It guarantees a high level of freedom with a massive and diverse world map spanning about 30 million square kilometers, and includes over 2 billion NPCs with content nearing infinity. BNW also features a perfect replica of sensory systems and graphics. It was not just a simple game, it was a whole other world. Our protagonist wasn't particularly interested in those features. The primary reason he started playing the game was to make money. He realized he could earn by playing games, and it has been 1 year since he started. Although he was a member of a normal class, he obtained the profession of Elemental Mage. As a result of working tirelessly, he became the master of the Beamer Guild, which had 200 members. He looked at his chest full of gold coins, knowing it should be enough to live comfortably and hassle-free for a while. The man beside him excitedly told him that with that much gold, it must be worth a few hundred in cash, and asked him how on earth he discovered such a sweet dungeon. He replied that there is a way to know everything. Seeing how talented he was in games despite his educational and family background, he believed there was no law telling him he must die. He knew that BNW was the only way he could survive. However, one rainy day in the forest, he was running while being chased by 2 equipped men. He managed to create distance between himself and the men. Due to the rain, the men couldn't see properly and lost sight of him. One of the men told his comrade that it seemed like he went that way, but there was nowhere to run, so they had to search around there while he hid behind a tree near them. He cursed the men and called them dog-like Genesis bastards. The Genesis Guild is a supergiant guild with significant influence within BNW, and those bastards were the ones who destroyed the Beamer Guild that he operated. He thought that no matter how large the Genesis Guild was, he didn't expect the power gap to be so vast and to fail without even putting up a proper struggle. The system then warned him that he had been playing for 47 hours and reminded him that excessive gaming can interfere with his normal daily life. This made him ask the system where it expected him to go when he had nowhere to go, knowing that even if he logged out, the only thing waiting for him was the musty basement room and the worn-out VR capsule. To stand against the Genesis Guild, he had taken on hundreds of millions in debt and acquired high-priced items, but they were stolen by the enemy due to the betrayal of his trusted comrades. Now, the only remaining items on him were 3 dry beef jerky sticks, a torn cloak, 2 treasure maps torn in half, and a faded wand. He sat down on the ground, defeated, and sighed, wondering if it was all over for him. He bit his lips hard in anger, asking himself why he couldn't do it and why he always lost after all the efforts and sacrifices he had made. Suddenly, an old man appeared in front of him and told him that it was because he was weak. The old man also said that the world is a ruthless place for the survival of the fittest, and that it was only natural for the weak to be trampled upon. The old man then asked him why he complains of injustice, making him wonder since when the old man had been in front of him. The old man then remarked that it was pathetic to see a young guy acting like a beggar with a pale blue appearance, begging for sympathy. This made him furious, wondering who calls someone else a beggar just like that. He then turned to the old man, telling him to not mind him and continue on his way because he was not in the mood to engage in wordplay at that moment. The old man was shocked by his action and yelled at him that he couldn't even listen when an adult was speaking. But then, he felt something and turned around to see a man launching an attack from above, making him shout to the old man that it was dangerous. A loud explosion could be heard in the forest. The attacker told his comrade that he was a reckless jerk and suggested they go together, yet he went in alone, calling his comrade a slowpoke. The man then looked at our protagonist and told him that he really didn't log out, even though he was injured while protecting the old man. The man replied that he had said it himself, he didn't want to log out because reality felt more like hell, making the man's comrade unable to believe it. Meanwhile, he was holding his hand in pain, knowing that he was doomed and he didn't even have a weapon he could use. He then told the old man that it was a dangerous place and begged him to leave quickly, but the old man just asked him if he was talking to him, making him angrily yell that, of course, he was talking to him and that it was not the time for joking. The man's comrade asks about the old man, questioning if he is an NPC, but the man just laughingly replies that it was really funny to see him worrying about an NPC. Suddenly, another man appears and tells them that our protagonist has always been like this, enjoying cosplaying as a nice guy. Shocked to see the man, he realizes it's Kim Jinwoo, his traitorous comrade. Jinwoo responds that calling him a traitor is a bit harsh and that he simply transferred because he received a better offer. He asks Jinwoo how he could betray him when he considered him family, but Jinwoo retorts, asking if his family talk isn't getting old and suggests that if he really thought of them as family, he wouldn't have confronted Genesis. He accuses him of recruiting guild members only to use them as pawns to maintain control of the guild. Surprised and about to reply, he is interrupted as Jinwoo shouts at him to forget his family ideals while grabbing something from his inventory, commenting on the saying that one should avoid companies that feel like family because they only become like family when the business thrives. He tells Jinwoo that it was he who stole his weapon. Jinwoo points the staff at him, stating that even if he had it, it was just a piece of junk to him, but he'd put it to good use. Jinwoo then attacks, shouting that his weapon is awesome. The attack explodes upon impact. The man calls Jinwoo a psycho and asks how he can just dismiss their shared history so casually, but Jinwoo replies that he has to step on them firmly so they can't rise again. But then, someone calls Jinwoo worthless scum, and the old man tells Jinwoo that no matter how much of a trash he was, he didn't stab a knife in the back of a benefactor, and then laugh. The old man, who blocked Jinwoo's attack, tells him he isn't even worth recycling. Jinwoo, stuttering, calls out to the old man in confusion, while he and the men are shocked. Jinwoo questions if the old man really blocked his attack, to which the old man casually asks if that was supposed to be an attack. The old man then punches the air, demonstrating how it's done, which hits the men and shatters the ground. He covers his face to avoid the debris from the old man's powerful attack and peeks to see the damage indicator show 999 billion, the maximum damage that can be inflicted in the game. He can't believe it, but the system activates his rune of insight, revealing that the old man walking down the street is an entity type NPC, human race, at level 999. He shouts in disbelief, questioning if the old man's level is truly 999. The old man tells him that he has been observing him for a long time and acknowledges that although he has no talent, no money, and not even luck, he admires how he struggles with all his might. Suddenly, the system interface appears beside him, displaying the sacred bond of connection under the category of epic quest. The content instructs him to bow respectfully to the old man on the street. The reward is unknown, but he is warned to perform the bow very respectfully, otherwise, he risks being struck dead by the angry old man. Realizing the incredible opportunity, he notes that the quest content isn't particularly difficult, though the final warning is somewhat concerning. Unsure of the exact implications, but aware that such a chance may never come again, he bows deeply in front of the old man and thanks him for saving his life. He then pleads with the old man to accept him as his disciple. The system confirms that he has completed the epic quest, the sacred bond of connection, and congratulates him on becoming a disciple of Deus and on his class change from elemental mage to disciple. Confused, he asks what it means to have the profession of a disciple, and Deus replies that it literally means he has become his disciple. Deus then reaches out to him, explaining that as his disciple, he will lead him on the path to invincibility, leaving him stunned. With worry in his heart, he accepts Deus's hand in agreement. Suddenly, a powerful circle of magic appears underneath them, and he realizes with astonishment that it is teleportation magic. A few seconds later, they arrive midway up Kunlun Mountain, and he finds himself kneeling on the ground, overwhelmed by confusion. He can hardly believe that Deus used teleportation magic so effortlessly when even high-ranking players find it difficult, leading him to wonder if the old man is really an NPC and not an administrator. Deus tells him to stop dawdling and follow him because there is a place nearby where he will begin his training. He stutteringly replies with a yes. A moment later, he was amazed to see a beautiful, clear lake in front of him. Deus explained that this was the lake of purification, which would purify him. He asked Deus what he meant by that, and Deus replied that he didn't intend to teach him for long, so he would undergo an intensive training for 99 days, and the lake would assist with this process. Confused, he asked Deus for clarification, and as Deus approached him, he explained that it was literally purification, adding that new wine must be poured into a new bottle. Then, Deus kicked him from behind, telling him that he was incredibly filthy and should wash up first. He fell into the lake, covering his mouth, thinking he was dying, but then realized he could still breathe. The system then informed him that the lake of purification was working and warned that severe pain would commence for 1 minute, urging him to prepare, which left him bewildered. As the countdown continued, lightning struck him, making him scream in pain, while Deus simply laughed, commenting that his screams sounded refreshing. He felt every cell in his body burning, making him wonder if the system allowed that level of pain. He shakily approached the log out sign in the system, but stopped when memories of his guild being destroyed, being chased by men, his father beating his mother in real life, and working himself to death flashed through his mind. He clenched his teeth and endured the pain, telling himself that he wouldn't run away anymore. When the timer reached 2 seconds, bubbles surfaced from the lake. As the minute ended, he crawled out of the lake, stutteringly saying that he had done it, and then lay happily on the ground. Suddenly, the system popped up in front of him, informing him that his purification was complete and his character would be reset. The status then displayed his information. His name was Han Tisung. His level was initially 201 but reset to 1. His entity type was Adventurer, and his class was Disciple. He sat up in shock upon seeing this and shakily pointed at his level, but Deus simply told him that the purification was successful. He asked Deus what happened because his level had become 1. But Deus threw a towel at him and told him that an hour ago, he was nothing but trash. He asked Deus if he was referring to his state before meeting him, to which Deus replied yes, noting that his strength, stamina, mana, and everything else were improper. Deus then questioned if he expected to become invincible with such imbalanced growth, making him wonder if Deus reset his level because he was a useless character. Deus told him that he would rebuild him from head to toe and draw out his potential to the limit. He explained that while others gain 1 mana, he would gain 1.2 mana, leaving him surprised and wondering if it meant that if others gained 100 mana at level 100, he would gain 120 instead. He then bowed to Deus, telling him he was grateful and would bow deeply as his disciple, but Deus just sighed, remarking that he had been bowing a lot today. Deus walked away, telling him it was too early to be pleased and that he still had a long way to go to become the unparalleled strongest. Deus also mentioned that for the remaining 99 days, the process would be repeated 100 times, involving even more rigorous training. He interrupted Deus, asserting that he could handle it, whether it was 100 times or 1,000 times, because he wouldn't give up as long as he could get stronger. Deus looked at him in surprise and expressed hope that his determination wouldn't waver. The system then showed that his true training, termed Rebirth, was beginning, involving enduring Deus's training, and is at 1%. Meanwhile, in the United States, at the headquarters of B&W Games company called Hive, inside the special department known as Hexagon, a man checked the system and exclaimed that Epic Code 007 had been activated, causing everyone to be shocked. The employees rushed to the man to inquire if Deus had taken on a disciple, who it was, and if it was the professional gamer from before, but the man replied that it appeared to be an ordinary gamer. Suddenly, a man entered asking what they meant by ordinary gamer. The Hive vice chairman and head of the Hexagon team, Oppenheimer, ordered the man to zoom in on the screen, which he did. Oppenheimer then reviewed T-Sung's profile and determined that T-Sung was an ordinary heavy user from Korea. He then stared at T-Sung's data and stated that they should see how long T-Sung could endure. Han T-Sung sought an escape from his gutter-like reality, so he turned to B&W to find refuge, but he soon realized that the game was not much different from reality. This revelation made him wonder if perhaps the issue lay with him rather than the game. However, after meeting his master, he found new hope and began training to become invincible. 3 months had already passed. In the heavy snow of the mountain, Deus enjoyed his cup and happily told him that he lived to see his student giving him alcohol, and that he should drink it too. T-Sung thanked his master. Deus then mentioned that after today, the promised 99 days would end and asked T-Sung if he felt sad about leaving Kunlun Mountain. T-Sung replied no, questioning how he could possibly feel sad about the end of such hellish training. Deus accused him of making weak excuses after only 3 months of training, reminiscing about how back in his day, he trained without even sleeping. T-Sung remembered that during the break he was given, he worked hard to pay off his debts. T-Sung then told Deus that he had been curious about something and asked if Deus had ever experienced a time similar to his. Deus shared that there was a time when he also pursued strength, but unlike T-Sung, he was not trash. This comment irritated T-Sung, making him wonder if Deus even felt sorry for him. Deus continued, explaining that 500 years ago, there were 8 people who were the strongest on the continent, and he was always in last place. He had desperately wanted to surpass those stronger than him, so he stayed in Kunlun Mountain to train. As a result, he obtained the greatest power, but he still couldn't win. T-Sung asked if his opponents were that strong, stunned when Deus replied that when he came down from the mountain, 500 years had passed, and they were all old and worn out. Deus remarked that because he was training for so long, he hadn't felt the passage of time. Deus then pulled an old book from under his coat and threw it in front of him, telling him to take it. T-Sung asked what it was, but Deus challenged him back, asking if he knew what invincible meant. T-Sung suggested it meant being stronger than anyone else, but Deus corrected him, explaining that invincible means unbeatable power. It is the power to overcome any enemy. T-Sung questioned if winning wasn't only possible when they were stronger than their enemy, but Deus told him that there was no need to become the strongest. All he had to do was weaken the enemy stronger than him. Deus revealed that the technique he just mentioned was the beginning and end of becoming a Debuff master. When T-Sung opened the book, a strong power surged out, and the system notified him that he had completed his quest of rebirth and endured 100% of Deus's training. His class had changed from Disciple to Debuff Master, and his nickname had changed from T-Sung to Siegfried. He wondered why his nickname had changed to Siegfried. Deus, teasing him, explained that since he was his only disciple, they should use a name that suited him, and from now on, he should use that name. Stunned, he realized that in BNW, players couldn't change their nicknames, yet Deus could alter even the system's laws as he pleased. Despite the change, he felt reborn and believed that with this new power, he could even defeat those from Genesis. Since he had become his disciple, there was something he must do, and he asked Deus what that was. Deus replied that those people he had mentioned earlier likely each had a successor prepared before dying, so he should defeat those descendants with the techniques he created. The system then displayed an epic quest, instructing him to defeat the 7 descendants of the 8 strongmen who had dominated the continent 500 years ago, excluding their master, Deus. The system listed his targets: the descendant of Vajra, the Thunder God, the descendant of the Sword Saint Murcielago, a descendant of the Great Sage Ziggurat, the descendant of the Blood Demon Berserk, the descendant of Pope Mogris, the descendant of the Grand Place Wind Force, and the descendant of King Brown. Excited, he agreed and told Deus that no matter what, he, as his disciple, would definitely defeat them and prove his strength. Deus commented that his eyes looked much better and snapped his fingers. A teleportation magic circle appeared underneath him, and Deus told him that his training was complete and he should now go forth and become the strongest successor. He told Deus that he was ready to go. The teleportation magic then whisked him away, leaving Deus alone in his house, pondering if he might have put too much pressure on T-Sun. Later, T-Sun arrived at the western end of the continent, in Bierman territory. Walking through the forest, he mused that Deus had sent him far away, but he felt it worked out well. Knowing he was only level 1, he realized that if he encountered the Genesis members in his current state, he would be easily defeated. His urgent priority was to grow without interference until he reached at least level 100. He opened his job description, and the system revealed that the Debuff Master role was a melee damage dealer, supporter, and wide area nuker. Its description detailed that it was a physical attack type debuffer that fights by weakening enemies using various debuffs, with heavy weapons as its main weapon and heavy armor as its main armor. The system displayed his equipment mastery, which included level 1 blunt mastery, shield mastery, greatsword mastery, spear mastery, gauntlet mastery, and heavy armor mastery, all ranked as the system then showed that his Debuff Master's skills were Weakening Curse, Desperate Defense, and Smash, all at level 1, with others still locked. He knew Smash was an active skill but wondered if tweaking Curse and Desperate Defense could affect area of effect debuffs. The system revealed that Desperate Defense creates a circular field centered around the caster, reducing enemies' defense and magic resistance, with its range widening as the skill level increases. Weakening Curse creates a similar field that gradually reduces enemies' health and mana. He was shocked upon reading this and couldn't believe it reduced both defense and magic resistance, as well as dealing fixed damage proportional to mana, which seemed incredibly powerful. Excited to try out his new skills, he wondered if there were any monsters nearby or if he should just target a passing NPC. Suddenly, he heard someone screaming that they were not his enemy, and turning, he saw a tiger running towards him with a hamster in its mouth. The hamster, calling him a human bastard, begged him to save him. The system then displayed an emergency hidden quest to rescue the Great Spirit, tasking him to defeat the mutated tiger and rescue the Great Spirit, though the reward remained unknown. He wondered if the talking hamster was the Great Spirit. Noting that the mutant tiger was level 25, he questioned if the level wasn't too high for a monster in a starting area. Unsure of what to do, he spotted a branch on the ground and picked it up. He then activated his Desperate Defense and Weakening Curse, which decreased the tiger's defense, magic power, health, and mana. He noticed the tiger and hamster's strength draining away, so he struck the tiger with the tree branch, causing it to release the hamster. He recalled Deus's teaching that no matter how strong the opponent was, he just needed to weaken it. The tiger growled in anger and lunged at him with its sharp claws, but fortunately, he ducked just in time to dodge the attack. He then swung his stick at the tiger's body multiple times. The tiger struck at him again, and as it came close, he bent his body and ducked his head to avoid the claws. The hamster, witnessing this, was amazed and thought he was incredible, but still couldn't believe that a mere level 1 human was fighting on par with a level 25 mutant. The hamster begged him to defeat the tiger and save him, which annoyed him because the hamster had been yapping since the fight started, making him wonder if the hamster was cheering or distracting him. He refocused on the tiger, noting that despite being struck repeatedly and suffering from debuffs, the level gap was still significant. He realized that both his mana and health were dwindling, and his makeshift weapon was reaching its limit. Clenching his arm tightly, he knew he had to finish the fight with his next strike or he would be finished. He activated his smash skill, delivering a powerful strike. The tiger growled furiously at him, but he remained calm. As the tiger leaped towards him, claws poised to slash, he dodged and approached, swinging his stick at its head with all his might using the smash skill. When the branch connected with the tiger's head, it exploded from the force, and the tiger collapsed to the ground, defeated. The system then alerted him that he had leveled up, reaching level 15. He looked at a small scratch on his arm in disbelief that he had advanced to level 15 in one go. He then glanced at the defeated tiger, realizing that defeating the seemingly undefeatable was precisely what a debuff master should do. The hamster shouted at him to stop dawdling and quickly get him out of there. After being freed, the hamster sighed, saying he had come back from the brink of death and thanked him, speaking in a surprisingly refined manner. The hamster then expressed a desire to repay his kindness but asked if he ever felt lonely adventuring alone. Before the hamster could suggest joining him, he immediately interrupted, stating that he didn't mind the loneliness, and walked away, leaving the hamster shocked. The hamster then hugged his leg, shouting through tears that he was currently powerless due to amnesia, and begged to be taken along. He merely asked the hamster why it was being so clingy and remarked that he did not have a hobby of raising pets. Suddenly, the system notified him that he had completed a hidden quest, and his reward was a contract with the Great Forest Spirit, making him wonder if the hamster was the quest reward. He then realized that the hamster was called the Great Spirit and thought that, although it was a hamster, he had heard that a Great Spirit's rank was similar to that of a Spirit King. Even if there was no immediate use, if it regained its strength, it would be a great help to him. He told the hamster that they should make a contract, acknowledging its tough but cute sides, which made the hamster sweetly ask if he really meant it. They then began forming a contract, and afterward, the system confirmed that his contract with the Great Forest Spirit was successful. The system revealed that the Great Forest Spirit was named Prometheus Cactus Hydra Leviathan Bless Zacharias Anabolic Gallardo. Its level was 15, matching the contractor's level. The race was defined as Divine Beast, the class as Trickster, and its titles included Forest Tyrant, Guardian of the Forest, Forest Demon, Forest Troublemaker, and Forest Renegade, but its possessed skills were unavailable. Realizing that sharing levels as contract partners meant that when he got stronger, the hamster would too, he wondered about the title Forest Renegade. The hamster then suggested they formally introduce themselves, starting to recite his lengthy name, but he cut it short, saying it was too long. A notification prompted him to give a new name to the contracted Great Forest Spirit, so he declared that from that day on, its name would be Hamji, which means hamster, leaving Hamji stunned and surprised. Moments later, Hamji was irate. He apologized to him and told him to stop, but Hamji angrily questioned how he could name a great spirit Hamji. He simply reassured Hamji, asking if it wasn't a cute name. Hamji retorted that even if it was, naming a great spirit Hamji was absurd. But he reminded Hamji that it was too late to change now and told him to accept it. He then inquired why Hamji had been locked in a cage when he was a great spirit, to which Hamji replied that he did not know, as he had come to his senses already trapped and could not recall any of his past memories, except his name and that he was a great spirit of a certain forest. He summarized that it was indeed a frustrating situation, and Hamji, stretching his face, told him that he, as his master, should also help him recover his memories. He advised Hamji not to rush, emphasizing that for both of them, getting stronger was the priority for now. A moment later, they arrived at a guild house. Jericho, the mercenary guild window employee who is an NPC, greeted him and asked what brought him to their mercenary guild. He replied that he wanted to obtain a mercenary license, knowing that to grow further, he needed one. Jericho explained that to obtain the license, he would need to pass a qualification test, and asked if he thought it necessary to verify his abilities, regardless of how immortal he claimed to be. Jericho then instructed him to capture mutant rabbits that frequently appeared in the vacant territories. He placed something on the table and asked Jericho if it could suffice for verification. Jericho looked at it in shock and asked if it was the claw of a mutant tiger, known for its strength and durability and used as material for lower-grade weapons. He proudly told Jericho that on his way to the village, he had caught a mutant tiger and asked if that wasn't more reliable than catching some rabbits. Jericho agreed that it certainly was, but expressed disbelief that he had captured the mutant by himself. Jericho then concealed the tiger claw under his jacket, telling him that the verification was sufficient, and he would issue the license. He asked him to follow. Moments later, Jericho handed him his mercenary guild license, which he accepted while thanking Jericho. Jericho then asked if he had time to listen to a story. Jericho revealed that lately, abnormal amounts of mutants had been gathering, and a nearby ranch was recently attacked, leaving the village people trembling in fear. He asked Jericho if the frequency of monster appearances in the village had increased, to which Jericho confirmed and added that the mutant tiger he had caught was originally a creature that couldn't be seen in Beerman territories until recently. He noted that lately, not only mutant tigers, but also vicious monsters like mutant wolves and mutant buffaloes were threatening the Beerman territories. He replied that he understood and realized that it was indeed strange to have a level 25 mutant in that low-level area, indicating that something must be wrong. Jericho then expressed his hope for assistance, and the system presented him with a new quest named Guardian of the Beerman Territory. His mission was to do his best to help the Beerman territory until the situation was resolved, with a reward of 100 gold. However, he told Jericho that his level was too low to be of help. Jericho confessed that it was embarrassing to say, but he was the only one in the village who had caught a mutant tiger alone, especially just after the nearby ranch had been attacked by mutants. Moreover, their territory was on the edge of the border, without any magic communication circle, meaning it would take at least a week to get help from outside. This made him wonder if the place was really in dire straits. Normally, he wouldn't accept such an unreasonable quest, but this quest reeked of disaster. He then told Jericho that he understood what was at stake, to which Jericho excitedly anticipated his help, and he assured Jericho that it was nothing and he would assist. Meanwhile, a little further from the Beerman territory, at Schreier Castle, death was everywhere. A man was crawling on the floor, covered in his own blood. He begged someone to spare him, but then a huge axe was hurled at the hopeless man's head, decapitating him while someone reminded him that he had been told not to raise his head and commented that humans were indeed a foolish race. However, they needn't worry, as he, who was more superior, would become their king. Meanwhile, Tisung emerged from the weapon shop, and Hamji, who had been busy eating, commented that he looked completely like a beggar earlier, but now he seemed like a decent beggar, which annoyed him. He asked Hamji what he meant by a decent beggar. Hamji jumped onto his shoulder while remarking that he couldn't keep wearing torn training clothes forever. As he examined his new weapon, wondering if it would suffice, Hamji mentioned that now that the shopping was done, they should eat. He called Hamji a freeloader and asked if he had already eaten everything, given that he had just bought him a mana stone earlier. Hamji angrily replied that low-quality meals didn't even register on his radar, which made him ask Hamji angrily if he knew how expensive those mana stones were. They were staring at each other in anger when a man approached him, asking if he was the adventurer who had caught the mutant tiger. The man greeted him and introduced himself as Jang Manbok, the one who would accompany him on the quest. Manbok then introduced the others, Thompson and Rousey. He wondered if these were the other mercenaries Jericho had mentioned, recalling Jericho's assurance that he wouldn't be too burdened as there were other mercenaries besides him. He shook Manbok's hand and introduced himself as Siegfried. Manbok told him they were counting on him and called him captain, surprising him and prompting him to ask why he was called captain. Manbok replied that the strongest person should be the captain, and since they were just beginners who couldn't even catch a mutant tiger on their own, it made sense. He couldn't believe Manbok admitted it so openly but replied that he understood. Thompson noted that the team had been formed and asked what they should do next. He replied that since Jericho's request was for them to guard the village alongside the Beerman regular army, they should start by visiting Bucardi Ranch because he had heard the situation there was serious. Later, at Bucardi Ranch in Beerman territory, the army was battling mutant animals. Manbok, who was blocking a mutant wolf, shouted to Thompson to act now, and Thompson rushed to stab the wolf with his spear. Manbok lay on the ground, noting that it was tough and musing that it would be easier if he were 10 years younger. Thompson asked if it was coming their way. Manbok looked to his side, asking what was coming, and suddenly, a level 25 mutated bison attacked them, throwing them into the air. He was busy fighting another mutant and didn't notice the bison heading towards him. When he heard someone stutteringly shout a warning, he saw the bison. He then activated his smash skill and ran forward to meet the bison in the center, striking it on the head with his weapon and knocking it to the ground, defeated. The system then showed that his level had increased, and he had reached level 20. He was catching his breath, exhausted, while thinking that there were so many eyes watching him that he couldn't even use his debuff skills. He mused that hunting alone would be more comfortable. Rousey asked him if he was okay while carrying Manbok on her shoulder, and he replied that he was fine. He then asked if the others were okay, mentioning that it seemed like they were hit by the bison earlier. Manbok replied that he was a tank, so he was okay, but Thompson was badly injured. They assured him there was no threat to Thompson's life, but he would be incapacitated for a while, which he acknowledged with understanding. Manbok then commented that it was impressive to see him catch a mutated bison alone and confirmed that it wasn't a false rumor he had swallowed a mutated tiger. Manbok even asked if he had any plans of becoming a pro gamer, but he just awkwardly laughed and replied that he got lucky with that last hit. Suddenly, a powerful monster was said to have returned. and the mutated animals immediately looked back upon hearing this. They then rushed back into the forest. Nanbok noted that all of them had started retreating and asked if it meant that the quest was complete, but he questioned if it wasn't strange that those mutants seemed to have all agreed to run away in the same direction as if they were ordered to retreat. The system then popped up, showing him that he had a general quest, titled Investigation, with a mission to investigate why the mutated creatures caused the monster wave, offering a reward of 200 gold. He realized this was a follow-up to the territory defense quest, making him wonder if it was not just about simple eradication. He told them that they should return to the main tent first because he would find out where the mutated animals were headed and come back. Nanbok asked if he would be alright by himself, to which he replied that he would be fine and he was the only one in good condition anyway. Hamji then happily told them that he was there too, so they shouldn't worry, making Rousey blush because Hamji was so cute. A moment later, he entered the forest and saw the mutated animals' footprints on the ground, confirming they were all heading in the same direction as he had expected. He thought that if he recalled correctly, that direction was headed toward the Schreier territory, making him wonder if they had changed their target to that place. Hamji then called him over and, hanging in a tree, asked him where he had gone, accusing him of just playing around there. He pointed in front of him, telling him to look over there. He then saw the castle of the Schreier territory. Suddenly, the castle gate opened, and he was shocked to see a monster riding the mutated tiger to meet the other mutated animals. The system then identified it as Garugo, a legendary golden goblin that is said to appear once every 100 years. It was classified as a boss with the title of Goblin Lord, possessing light and fire attributes, and a special ability of mind control that could only be used on monsters. Upon seeing this in the system, he realized that Garugo was the reason the mutants had gone wild. Hamji jumped onto his shoulder and asked what they were going to do now that they knew the cause. He replied that they should return to the barracks for now, as there was nothing he could do alone in the current situation. He then returned to the Bierman Territory barracks. A bald man introduced himself as Blick, the commander-in-chief of the Bierman Territory army. He shook Blick's hand while introducing himself as Siegfried. Blick mentioned that he had heard about Siegfried's accomplishments and that Jericho had strongly recommended him. However, as much as Blick would have liked to chat, it was not possible at the moment due to the urgency of the situation, and they needed to get straight to the point. He then explained that what they had observed was that the Schreier territory had fallen to goblins, and Blick asked if he was implying that the cause of the mutant crisis was also because of goblins. He confirmed that it was because of the Goblin Lord, who had used his mind control ability to manipulate the mutants and seize control of the Schreier territory, and was now aiming for the Bierman territory. The man warned Blick that if his observations were accurate, their Bierman territory was essentially doomed, as the Goblin Lord was a monster they could not handle on their own. He suggested that they needed to evacuate the Lord and the residents immediately. Nanbok raised his hand, asking why they were unaware of the neighboring Schreier territory being attacked until now. Blick replied that they hadn't had much interaction with Schreier to begin with, and in a small territory like theirs, the communication network wasn't properly established. He added that they didn't even have the luxury of conducting investigations and were too busy trying to fend off the mutant attacks. He also noted that the Goblin Lord must have targeted that vulnerability, isolating Bierman to create this dire situation. Blick lamented that their proud Bierman, boasting a 300-year history, was crumbling just because of the goblins and asked, shakingly, how they should report this to their lord. He reassured Blick that there was a way, albeit not guaranteed, making Blick surprised and stutteringly ask what that method was. He replied that while he couldn't be 100% certain, if only they had time, it could be worth trying. Blick then asked him what they needed time for, and he replied that it was time for him to grow. He then laid out his plan, which was simple. First, to operate the special forces with agile individuals, engage in guerrilla warfare to cut through the mutants and disperse them as much as possible, then lure the dispersed mutants toward his location, where he would take care of the rest himself. He informed Blick that after reaching level 30, he would join them and confront the goblins. Blick reminded him that those who descended from another world like him could grow quickly thanks to the Rune of Transcendence, but cautioned that the Goblin Lord was level 50, and even if he reached level 30, there would still be a 20-level gap. He acknowledged that Blick was correct about the disadvantage, but argued that just as he had managed to capture a level 20 mutant tiger at level 1, he didn't see it as entirely impossible. Even if he failed, at least it would buy time for reinforcements to arrive. Blick, deep in thought, finally sighed and replied that he understood and would trust him. The system then displayed a general quest titled Kill the Goblin Lord, Garugo, with his mission being to defeat the Goblin Lord, but the reward was unspecified. While he was busy examining the system, Hamji interrupted to get his attention, mentioning that he had a question. He immediately apologized to Hamji, assuming he needed money to buy food, which made Hamji exasperatedly yell that he wasn't talking about food and asked if he was calling him a parasite when, in fact, he was the one being parasitic. Hamji then questioned why he hadn't mentioned earlier that the bald man seemed to be hiding something. He countered by asking Hamji how he knew about that, to which Hamji proudly responded that once he achieved the rank of Great Spirit, he developed a certain level of perception, and he shouldn't be underestimated. He explained to Hamji that when he reached level 30, he could acquire new skills that would be significantly helpful in facing Gorugo, though he couldn't guarantee a 100% chance of victory. Hamji asked if there was a reason he was hiding those skills, to which he replied that he wasn't ready to reveal them yet since there were regular users around, and if they saw those cheat-like skills, it would cause an uproar. Moreover, rumors would spread quickly. Hamji remarked that humans lead such tiring lives, but he countered that it's better to live a tiring life than to live simply and be caught off guard. Manbuk approached him and asked if he had finished talking with the commander, to which he replied yes, but expressed concern that the plan seemed too focused on him. Manbuk laughingly reassured him not to worry about it and expressed gratitude for being included in the plan. Manbuk then mentioned they were planning to rest before they left and asked him if he wasn't logging out. He replied that the operation was starting in 2 hours, so he was going to rest a bit too. Manbuk and Rousey then logged out. Hamji asked if he was going back to the other world, and he replied that he would be back soon, instructing him to get himself a snack with it as he threw a mana stone to Hamji. Hamji happily caught it and teased him about being a generous master, thanking him. But then Hamji looked back at him quizzically, asking if he hadn't said earlier that he didn't have any money. He teasingly replied that he had lied and that he was off, then logged out. He removed his helmet and stepped out of the machine, feeling his muscles stiffen. He walked to his bed, thinking he should eat some food, but as he lay down, he decided to skip eating since there was no time and chose to just sleep instead. He then realized how much had happened. His guild had collapsed. He became a fugitive, met his master, obtained the hidden job of Debuff Master, and was now fighting to acquire a territory. This made him realize that he, who initially played the game for revenge and money, was now purely enjoying it, leading him to question if he was not mature enough yet. Caught up in his thoughts about wanting to play again soon and desiring to become stronger and enjoy the game freely, he was unaware of men approaching his room. Unable to contain his excitement, he sat up in bed, deciding to level up a bit before the operation started. Suddenly, someone knocked on his door and asked if he was there. He cracked open the door slightly and asked who it was, as he wasn't expecting anyone. The man asked if he was Han Tisung and informed him that they were there to install a capsule. Confused, he replied that he hadn't ordered a capsule. The man checked but confirmed that the address was correct and asked again if his name was Han Tisung, to which he replied yes, but reiterated that he hadn't ordered it. The man handed him a paper while explaining that they were unsure of the details, but it seemed to be intended for him. He should examine the document because it was specifically requested when placing the order. He accepted the letter, which congratulated him on obtaining Epic Code 007, making him think that it referred to his class. He recalled hearing that hidden classes came with tremendous benefits, leading him to wonder if this was a gift from Beehive, the nickname for the game developer of BNW, Hive. He tried his best to conceal his excitement and rushed back to his room without closing the door. A minute later, he told the men that his room was a bit small, but they should come in and that they must have had a hard time getting there. He then asked them if they had a favorite drink. The men walked into his room, unaware that a suited man was hiding behind the wall watching them. This man reported to the chairman that they had arrived at Han Tisung's house and had started the installation. The chairman thanked the man, who was the director. The director mentioned that Tisung had no relation to him and questioned why the chairman was giving him the capsule as a gift. The chairman replied that it was because they shared the same hidden class, and they should consider it camaraderie. After the installation, he held the remote of the capsule, remembering seeing it in an advertisement before. It was for the Hyper VR Capsule Ogre, which was endorsed by Ki Hyung-seok, the guild master of Genesis. He couldn't believe that the Hyper VR Capsule Ogre, which regular players could never afford no matter how hard they worked, was now installed in his house. He looked around his new capsule, wondering if Beehive was insane to give away an ogre just like that, and if this was the special treatment for hidden classes. He put the helmet on, exclaiming that it was not the time for sleep because he could sleep when he was dead, but he should try it out immediately. The new capsule felt different from the old one, the cushioning that wrapped around his body, and the enhanced comfort of VR that made his head clearer even while playing was significantly better. It felt much more real than before. Suddenly, he felt hot wind and smelled something burning, which confused him. He opened his eyes, shocked to see a village burning in front of him. Inside the Beerman territory, the mutated animals were attacking the army, overwhelming them. He stood there, stunned in shock, and exclaimed, "What is this?" Suddenly, he heard Hamji, the Great Spirit, desperately begging for someone to save him. He then saw Hamji running from a mutated wolf. Hamji cried out that he couldn't run any further and questioned if this was where his life as the Great Spirit would end. Fortunately, he arrived just in time as the wolf was about to bite Hamji and struck the wolf on the head with his weapon. Hamji looked back in fear and was surprised to see him. He asked Hamji if he was hurt, and Hamji, jumping onto his face in anger, demanded to know why he had only just arrived, accusing him of nearly letting him die. He pulled Hamji from his face, telling him to calm down and explain what had happened. Hamji, still angry, retorted, "Can't you see by looking?" He then explained that as soon as they had returned to their world, it seemed the goblins had been waiting to attack with the mutants, catching the territory completely off guard. He was furious that those bastards had attacked while they were logged out. He then asked Hamji if it meant he was the only adventurer there at the moment. Hamji confirmed this, adding that this was why everything was in such disarray, but stopped when he reassured him that at least now he didn't have to worry about keeping up appearances. Smiling, he then told Hamji he had a mission for him, which gave Hamji a bad feeling. Meanwhile, a goblin licked its sword, now coated in blood, as the wolves growled angrily. The goblins advanced toward the army who were protecting the women and children. The man looked back at the civilians, realizing the evacuation had failed and that it would be difficult to move them now, not just because of 1 or 2 mutants, but because there were far too many. Exhausted from fighting, he cursed under his breath. Just as a goblin lunged at him, he thought it was the end. But suddenly, someone struck the goblin's face just in time, saving him. Confused and shocked, he struggled to comprehend what he had just witnessed. He then rushed at his weapon and caught it, then he activated his smash skill while charging toward the goblin. He struck the goblin in the face once again. The man watched, stunned, as he explained that he was fully aware of the situation and would handle things there. He instructed the man to quickly evacuate the people, but the man hesitated, reluctant to leave everything to a mercenary like him. However, his shock was evident when he saw the light emanate as he activated his desperate defense and weakening curse skills. He thanked the man for his offer to help but expressed a preference to work alone. Understanding, the man tossed him an item, saying it was nothing special but might help a bit, to which he replied that it was more than enough help. As the army assisted the civilians to escape, the man admitted feeling ashamed to be just a bystander, but entrusted him with the place before departing. This made him think it was okay to show his skills to an NPC who wasn't a player, though he felt awkward since it was a tactic only used in the Josian era. His attention snapped back when he sensed imminent danger and fortunately blocked a mutant's bite just in time with his weapon. Another goblin appeared, ready to slash him, but he managed to push the mutant away and block the goblin's attack in time. He noted the evident pain caused by the weakening curse, observing their hastened movements. The goblin continued to slash, but he effortlessly dodged and taunted the goblin for its sloppy posture. Blocking another attack, he commented that if it hurt that much, they should have fled when he set the trap. He then steadied his feet, leapt up with speed, and grabbed the goblin's head, slamming it into the ground while declaring that he would have still killed them before they could react. He realized the superiority of the expensive capsule, as he could see the enemy's movements more clearly. His skills had already been honed by his master Deus's training, but now he felt capable of dodging any attack. He struck the enemy swiftly, musing that the privileges of the wealthy weren't unfounded, and wondered if they were hoarding all the good stuff for themselves. The system displayed that he had leveled up and achieved level 22. He sighed, feeling like he had defeated many opponents to get there, yet disappointed that he was still only level 22. He noted that leveling up had become significantly harder since reaching level 20. Suddenly, Hamji appeared behind him in a full speed run, breathlessly calling him his fucking master. Tears streaming and being chased by a swarm of mutants and goblins, Hamji asked if this was enough for him. He smiled, thinking that leveling up difficulties didn't matter when he could just eliminate a ton of enemies. Meanwhile, Garugo, who was sitting peacefully, noted that the troublesome outsider had returned and seemed to be enjoying himself immensely. Garugo, stepping on an old man coughing in pain on the ground, said through Gwain's insight that this outsider was dangerous. If the outsider grew any stronger, he would pose a real threat, unlike the worthless trash, he said, glancing at Blick. Blick, severely injured, wondered if Siegfried had returned and gripped his sword tightly, knowing he needed to buy Siegfried some time to grow stronger. Blick then challenged Garugo, declaring him his opponent and vowing to defeat him there to reclaim his lord. Blick called Garugo a cowardly bastard, but Garugo simply smiled, questioning Blick's use of coward and if a man who couldn't even protect his master had any right to call him that. Garugo then grabbed the lord by the head, mockingly asking Blick why he didn't try to take his lord himself and commented that he wasn't sure how long Blick or his lord would last. However, Blick knew his lord didn't have much time left and silently urged Siegfried, who was struggling, to hurry. 30 minutes ago, Hamji shouted at him in fear, insisting that he wouldn't like what was about to happen. He reminded him that as a great spirit, he was not merely bait, and expressed concern about the possibility of getting caught while luring in enemies. He reassured Hamji that there was no other way and posed a challenging question. Would Hamji prefer his master to be a third-rate loser adventurer who just runs away, especially when fleeing would mean everyone there might die? Hamji begged him not to drag him into his fight, but he gave Hamji a fist bump, reassuring him that he was not fighting alone because they were in this together. He then affectionately called him Great Spirit Hamji. Hamji sighed in resignation and accepted his offer, but made him promise to prepare a lot of nuts for him later, which he agreed to. Back in the present, he apologized to a sulking and angry Hamji. Hamji yelled at him, exasperated from being chased and vowing never to fall for his manipulative tactics again. He acknowledged Hamji's ordeal, noting the lack of time and assuring him that there was no immediate danger, urging him to calm down. However, Hamji retorted that he should recognize that it was thanks to him that they had caught them, pointing to the swarm of enemy corpses behind him. He opened one of the bottles the army man had given him and inquired about the specific thing he had requested. Hamji, assuming he meant the Goblin Lord, said he hadn't seen it personally but had identified a promising location. He encouraged Hamji to continue the search. As Hamji ran through the forest, dodging mutants and goblins, he caught sight of Bierman Castle and sensed a terribly evil aura emanating from it. Though he couldn't see inside, he was certain that the malevolent presence belonged to the Goblin Lord, leading him to speculate that the Goblin King had taken over the castle. Normally, he knew that the Lord or other high-ranking officials would have evacuated by this point, but he couldn't shake off the eerie feeling, finding it odd that he hadn't seen the Lord's commander-in-chief, General Blick. He began to walk faster, telling Hamji that he needed to hurry, which left Hamji shocked and asking if he really planned to go in there. He confirmed his intention, advising Hamji that it was too dangerous and instructing him to stay put while he went ahead. But suddenly, one of the supposed dead mutants moved, causing Hamji to look back in horror and jump in shock. Realizing that something had just stirred, Hamji stutteringly told him that he wanted to accompany him after all. Minutes later, he arrived at the flaming castle, sensing a malevolent aura emanating from within. He hesitated, feeling it might be dangerous to just enter. Glancing back, he asked Hamji why he was following him despite being told to stay back because of the danger. Hamji replied that he was scared and worried about him venturing into such a perilous place alone. He sighed and told Hamji that his concern was so touching it almost brought him to tears. Hamji jumped on his back, asking if he had a plan. When he asked Hamji what plan he was referring to, Hamji pointed out that no matter how strong he was, their opponent was the Goblin Lord, and they needed to be prepared for when the attack might fail. He acknowledged Hamji's point but stressed that they didn't have time to plan now. He then bent down and leaped towards the castle at full speed, shouting to Hamji that sometimes, the right answer was to just push through and move forward. As they neared the castle door and barged in, Hamji was thrown, but they both managed to land safely on the floor. Hamji, checking his sore back, exclaimed that it was crazy to just go in without a plan, but he told Hamji to be silent. He then cautiously looked to the side and recognized Blick, who commented on his noisy entrance. He rushed to Blick, noticing his wounded arm, and asked why he hadn't evacuated. Blick replied that although he may be weak, he was still a knight, and as a knight, it was his duty to protect his lord. Clenching his teeth in frustration, he thought Blick was tough, but even the lord wasn't safe. Suddenly, Garugo addressed him, stating that he was the human who had wiped out his army and seemed stronger than any other humans he had faced. Garugo then expressed understanding of why the human brat was waiting for him. Confused, he asked Garugo what he meant, but Garugo just laughingly told him not to play coy, accusing him of sacrificing the Bierman people to buy time to grow stronger in preparation for facing him and remarking that in the end, those fools died in vain, waiting for him. Blick shouted at him not to listen to Garugo's manipulations, insisting they did what they had to do. He then asked Blick if the person lying down behind the goblin was the Lord, to which Blick replied affirmatively. He told Blick to wait for a moment, but Blick shouted back, urging him not to fall for Garugo's provocation. Nevertheless, he approached Garugo while concealing his weapon behind him. Garugo, laughing, asked if he was putting his weapon away to surrender and if guilt had driven him out of his mind, typical of inferior humans who get devoured. He then activated his new skill, Speed Regulation, which reduces the enemy's movement speed, attack speed, and casting speed. When Garugo launched an attack, he dodged swiftly and maneuvered behind Garugo to grab the Lord. Garugo, taken aback, lost sight of his movements and wondered if it was a coincidence or a trick. He glanced back furiously at Garugo and ordered him not to touch Blick with his dirty hands. Enraged, Garugo leaped toward him to attack, shouting that he should not give orders, but he simply swung his leg and kicked Garugo away. Realizing that it was not a coincidence but his own doing, Garugo acknowledged that he was not getting faster. Instead, his body was slowing down, feeling a filthy sensation trying to control his movements from all directions, which made Garugo demand to know what he had done. He turned to Blick, who was in shock, and asked if it was evident that speed regulation was effective, noting Garugo's reaction as proof. He then handed Blick his severed arm, saying that although he couldn't reattach it, it shouldn't remain with the enemy. He thanked Blick and the others for their resilience, which allowed him time to grow stronger while he set the Lord down. He assured Blick that he could take it from here. He then called out to Hamji to stop hiding and help escort the Lord and Blick to safety. Hamji, surprised but understanding, quickly obliged and began dragging the Lord away. Blick expressed his gratitude to Hamji but urged him to be gentle with the Lord, to which Hamji retorted for Blick to stop complaining and hurry. Watching them safely exit, he sighed with relief, knowing the immediate threat was mitigated. Now, only the Goblin King remained before him. Garugo, furious, shouted that not only had he humiliated him with that strange residual magic and stolen his loot, but he also swore to tear him limb from limb. Unperturbed, he replied that it seemed he no longer needed to worry about Garugo and suggested they should now have some real fun. Garugo then positioned its foot, swinging his huge axe at him, but he easily dodged it and attacked Garugo multiple times with his weapon. Garugo endured the pain and managed to punch him with his other hand. Fortunately, he blocked it with both hands, yet he was thrown against the throne. He realized that Garugo was starting to adapt to the speed regulation skill and wondered if high-level bosses were always a pain in the ass, regardless of how good their base stats were. Garugo walked toward him while commenting that he didn't look happy, asking where his cocky attitude had gone and if he thought he could win the battle with those measly tricks. Garugo then slightly freed himself from the speed regulation skill while telling him that he had really underestimated him. However, he wouldn't just kill him, he would cut off his limbs, chew his flesh, and place him on the altar of the god of war, then slowly cut off his head, piece by piece. He stood up, feeling annoyed, but thought just like that bastard Garugo said, there was a limit to speed regulation because it was a support skill, not an attack skill. He also knew he didn't have enough mana to use other skills because of the speed regulation skill, and thought that if he had known this, he would have tried using that skill first. He wondered if he should use that skill now but decided not to and dashed toward Garugo while thinking he'd wait for a better time. Garugo teasingly asked him if he had given up fighting like a moth, or maybe he had thought of another party trick. They both launched their attacks at each other, and their attacks collided in the center, but his arm holding the weapon got hurt because of the force. Garugo, laughingly, told him that it was a good expression and swung his axe at him continuously while shouting that he'd have to think quickly, even if he didn't have that much brain power. Garugo then furiously told him that he was nothing compared to him. Garugo then appeared near him and dragged him down, causing the floor to shatter. He coughed up blood because of his injury, and Garugo stepped on him while asking if he knew that since ancient times, humans had treated their goblin race as insignificant and barbaric. Garugo then admitted that to some extent, goblins were not inherently superior beings, but he would change that and kicked him hard in the stomach. Garugo then swore that someday, humans and even those above them would fear and revere them, goblins, and that it was the life's goal that a goblin lord should carry on his shoulders. His determination differed from that of a mercenary nobody without a cause. However, he just teasingly told Garugo that it was touching and that they couldn't escape their treatment even now. He then asked Garugo if he understood why he was disrespected, telling him it was because they were considered low-class dirty bastards, and that if he wanted respect, he should consider cleaning up his act. Garugo, gripping his axe tightly in anger, asked if those were his last words. He then pinned him down on the floor and swung his axe upward to gain force, shouting for him to just die already. Knowing it was the right moment, he deactivated his speed regulators, which Garugo sensed, but Garugo continued to swing his axe down at him, causing a loud explosion. Garugo thought he had put too much strength into the swing, but then realized his body felt lighter. Surprised that he missed, Garugo saw him reappear beneath him, wondering if he had been aiming for this situation. He then continuously attacked Garugo at speed, taking advantage of the situation. He struck Garugo in the face with his weapon, causing Garugo's crown to fall. Just as he was about to deliver a powerful blow to Garugo's head, Garugo whistled. He turned in surprise upon hearing something running toward them. Suddenly, a mutated tiger hit him, throwing him back, but he managed to stop himself from being thrown further. Garugo approached the tiger, commenting that he didn't want to destroy the castle, but was impressed that he had been driven to such extremes. Garugo then used his mind control skill on the tiger, proclaiming that the fun ended there and that the true power of a goblin lord lay in mind control. He told him that he would trample him with the strongest mutant he had painstakingly modified. Garugo ordered the tiger to attack, and the tiger pinned him to the ground with its claws. Garugo, laughing, told him to consider it an honor that the castle would become his tomb, calling him a worthless bastard. However, Garugos was shocked when he unleashed his power, declaring that it would be Garugos' grave instead. He activated his disdain for the strong skill and asked Garugo if he remembered calling him a mercenary nobody without a cause earlier. The system warned him that Garugo was at a higher level, but with his disdain for the strong skill, the damage he dealt increased and the damage he received was reduced. As the tiger rushed toward him, he declared that he was not just some mercenary nobody because he was the Debuff master. He then easily slashed Garugo into pieces, proclaiming that he would be the one to stand at the top of their world. The system then showed that he had cleared the quest to protect the Beerman estate. Another long day has come to an end. With the death of the Goblin Lord, the mental control over the monsters has been lifted and the remnants of them have been cleared out. Among the remaining people, those with minor injuries gathered their strength to rebuild the territory. He was sitting near the tent, drinking his potion. He burped happily and exclaimed that it finally felt like he was truly living. A potion that could bring him back from the brink of death was surely amazing because he couldn't experience things like it in real life. He smiled, still in disbelief that he had managed to defeat such a powerful Goblin Lord all by himself. He knew that if he hadn't had enough mana to use disdain for the strong back then, it would have been him who died. The disdain for the strong skill increases damage dealt to enemies with a higher level than his and reduces the damage he receives. Also, its effect increases with a greater level difference. He knew that among all the debuff skills he had learned so far, disdain for the strong was legendary in terms of its cheating abilities, but considering its extremely long cooldown, he needed to use it carefully. He also knew that he couldn't keep hiding his skills while fighting. Someone then asked him if it was okay for him to be out already. He greeted Blick, who told him that he seemed fine judging by his expression, and that his vitality was great. He stood up, asking Blick if he was sure it was okay for him to be out already and told Blick that he should rest a bit more. Blick replied that it was suffocating being cooped up inside the tent all the time and told him that he also received orders from their lord to bring him to the castle, so they should talk while they were on their way. While they were walking, he asked Blick if the lord was alright, because the lord seemed quite injured too. Blick replied that the lord could have been in real danger if he had been a little later, but right now, the lord had received treatment and was feeling much better. Blick laughingly also told him that the lord was famous for being a robust general despite his appearance, but he thought the lord would be kept busy for a while. He then saw Blick's wrapped cut arm and apologized to Blick. He then told Blick that if he had arrived a bit earlier, he wouldn't have lost his arm. But Blick told him that there was no need for him to worry about it and that, if anything, he should be thanking him because without him, they would have lost that land altogether. Losing an arm was a small price to pay for protecting the territory. He told Blick that he was truly a knight, but Blick just told him that they should stop with the flattery, and they should go because everyone was waiting for him. A moment later, the lord, shakingly, told him that he was the one who had saved the territory and introduced himself as Baron Wegman, the lord of the Beerman territory. After introducing himself, Wegman remarked that even his name felt powerful, like that of a hero. Wegman then knelt before him and expressed his gratitude for saving their territory, insisting that he should accept the old man's thanks. He told Wegman that there was no need for him to kneel, but just then, something cracked behind Wegman, causing him to lay on the ground in pain and shout that he was going to die. He asked Blick if he was correct in saying that Wegman had been a general, but Blick did not answer, his shyness evident. A moment later, Wegman apologized for presenting himself in such a state, and explained that his body hadn't fully recovered yet. Wegman expressed his desire to show gratitude once again, but he told Wegman that such profound thanks were unnecessary since, after all, he was hired as a mercenary to assist, and such appreciation was a bit much. Wegman insisted that the perspective from which he helped didn't matter. What was important was that he had risked his life to protect their territory, and without him, that peaceful and beautiful territory would have fallen into the hands of the wicked goblins. Wegman then said it was enough talk and told him to follow him as he had a gift for him. His eyes lit up, knowing it was time for the quest reward, and he happily followed Wegman, wondering if the reward would be as amazing as he expected, given the extreme difficulty relative to his level. They then entered the castle, and he noticed it was the place where they had ended up after fighting the Goblin Lord. He hadn't realized back then how spacious and large it was, almost like an altar. Wegman then retrieved something while explaining that it was the treasure vault created by his ancestors who loved collecting antiques, but now it was mostly depleted or sold, with hardly any treasure left. Wegman handed him a chest, telling him that there was still one item left that could truly be called a treasure. He opened the chest and a light emerged from it. He was then surprised to see that it was a voucher for Mercedes' workshop. He recalled that throughout history, the continent of Nurburg had been a crucible where magic, alchemy, and metallurgy were not only highly developed but had also advanced over thousands of years. These disciplines became so closely intertwined that the boundaries between them blurred, leading to a fusion phenomenon. This crystallization of technologies was known as an artifact, an amalgamation of magic, alchemy, and metallurgy. With the emergence of supersized workshops specializing in these artifacts, three stood out: Autonica, known for technological prowess; Bimerian, renowned for destructive power; and the ultimate Mercedes workshop. These three were regarded as the best, collectively called the three great houses of the continent. Among them, the highly esteemed Mercedes Workshop voucher was a reward for the Goblin Lord quest. The system then displayed that the Mercedes Workshop 100% plus 12 enhancement vouchers were official enhancement tools issued by the Mercedes Workshop. They allow any artifact to be enchanted 12 times in a row with a 100% success rate. Additionally, these vouchers have no level limit, are consumable, and are valued at 1,000 gold. His mouth fell open in shock. He knew that with such a level of enchantment guaranteed, the voucher was incredibly valuable. Wegman then shared that 700 years ago, when the Mercedes Workshop first opened, it faced financial difficulties as a new entity. In a desperate measure, they sold these coupons for just 1,000 gold. At that time, however, 1,000 gold was still considered a substantial investment for a new workshop, and Mercedes was nothing more than a hole-in-the-wall shop. It was his ancestor, Count Graham, who stepped in to help Mercedes, a name then largely ignored. Wegman then shared that whether Graham foresaw the future or simply had a penchant for collecting odds and ends, he couldn't say, but it turned out to be the best investment ever made. It seemed as though those vouchers had finally found their rightful owner. He told Wegman that the voucher was too much for him and that it would be worth tens of millions of gold now, but Wegman dismissed this, saying it was merely an ownerless item. Wegman revealed that they had originally intended to give it to a descendant who exhibited the qualities of a strong leader, but sadly, no such descendant existed. His own son, though the most outstanding, was still lacking, a fact he could perceive even without confirmation. Wegman then mentioned he had a request and asked if he would be willing to grant it. Curious, he asked what it was. Wegman explained that when he briefly regained consciousness, he thought he was being dragged outside. At that moment, he caught sight of his strong and unwavering gaze, which convinced him that he would become a hero who would shake the continent. He awkwardly laughed and told Wegman that such bold praise was embarrassing to hear. Wegman then inquired if he would assist his son should he become a hero later on, catching him by surprise. Wegman expressed his desire to invest in him as a hero, just as his ancestor had done. He might not know much else, but he recognized the bravery and courage in him. After a moment's thought, he accepted the Mercedes voucher, telling Wegman that with such a perspective, he couldn't refuse and promised to take care of his son. The system then revealed that he had received a general quest named A Promise with Baron Wegman. His mission was that, upon reaching the level of Master or higher, he should repay the gratitude to the Bierman territory for today's help and go to the capital to establish a relationship with Baron Wegman's son. The rewards were increased reputation and other unknown benefits, with notes indicating that the higher the level of the quest performer, the greater the increase in reputation. He then looked at the voucher, wondering if it was really supposed to be a reward, feeling somewhat tricked. He emerged from the castle, staring at the voucher in his hand, pondering what he should do about it. He knew that even if he just sold it at the auction house, he could easily make several hundred million, if not more. With that money, he could pay off all his debts and even buy a new house for his mother. But if Deus were here, he would shout at him, calling him a pathetic fool who couldn't see the forest for the trees. So, he decided to take his time thinking about it, putting the voucher in his inventory. Investing in his future self seemed like the right move, as money would come eventually. He then looked around, wondering where Hamji was since he hadn't seen him all day. He hoped Hamji wasn't up to something strange again. Meanwhile, in the Adventurers Guild, Hamji was shaking his butt, thinking it should be enough. He shook his butt even more, making Manbach laugh. Manbach commented that Hamji could really dance well and that his daughter used to act cute like that when she was young. But Hamji shouted to everyone that his dance wasn't for free. Manbach agreed that such cuteness couldn't come for free and threw a snack to him. Hamji thanked him and asked if there was anything else they wanted to see, perhaps a dumb impersonation of his stupid master, unaware that his master was behind him. He then asked Hamji what he meant by stupid master and angrily picked him up, demanding to know where he had been goofing off. He also asked what kind of streamer Hamji thought he was. Hamji shouted back that his master had no idea what it was like to have such a lousy master and resorted to dancing for snacks. He added that if his master wasn't going to give him snacks, he shouldn't bother him. He told Hamji he thought he only ate magic stones, to which Hamji responded that he only ate them when he was low on energy. Manbok saw him and asked where he had been because they had been looking for him everywhere. He replied that he had some business at the castle. Manbok told him to sit down for a moment, noting that he was always so busy that he still hadn't received his quest rewards. He replied that he was about to receive his rewards now. Manbok happily told him that he had never received so many rewards in his entire life, and if Thompson, who ran away because he was scared, found out about it, he'd be really jealous. He wondered if it was best not to mention the workshop voucher, thinking it would be like pouring cold water on Manbok's excitement. Jericho then saw him and called out to him. He told Jericho that he was glad he was safe. Jericho, with tears in his eyes, replied that it was all thanks to them that he was safe and that they should get to it because his pockets were emptied from building repair costs. However, they still needed to settle up, and the reward for that mission was 5,000 gold, making him apologize about it. Jericho then whispered, asking if it was true that he went to the castle separately to receive additional rewards from their lord without telling the other mercenaries. He replied that Jericho had good sense. He then put his gold rewards down and asked Jericho if he could ask him something. Jericho replied, wondering what he wanted to know. He told Jericho that when he went to the castle earlier, he didn't see the Goblin Lord's body and asked if Jericho knew where it was disposed of. Jericho replied that the corpses should be near the shore of Lake Bierman and that he heard their lord had hung the goblin scum who tried to escape as a public display. They were so miserable that even he felt queasy after seeing them briefly in the morning, making him sigh and think that Wegman was indeed tougher than he looked. He then wondered if it was time to bid farewell to the Bierman estate now. Though it was a short time, he experienced and grew a lot. He also wondered if his master Deus foresaw this, which is why he sent him there, but he decided not to dwell on it, feeling glad to Deus that he was off to a good start. On the other hand, someone appeared in front of the Adventurers Guild and shouted to his disciple that he did it, causing their ears to bleed and the others to cover their ears in pain. Jericho then walked in angrily, shouting that the person almost burst his eardrums and asked who was drinking at that hour. He told Jericho that he thought that person had already left. But then he noticed that husky and carefree voice calling someone disciple, making him wonder if it was his master Deus. They all came out to meet the person and were amazed to see him. They asked if that person was a man or a bear because they had never seen someone of such a high level before. He excused himself as he passed by, surprised to see that it was not his master. The old man then shouted to him, saying they had finally met, and called him his disciple. He was stunned for a moment and asked the old man if he was talking to him. The old man replied yes, asking who else it could be if not him. Hamji asked if that old man was the master he was talking about and commented that he looked really intimidating. He replied that the old man seemed unfamiliar to him too and didn't seem like just a senile old man. He then activated his rune of insight and saw that the old man was named Beetlejuice, an NPC, a human with a level of 361. Holding the title Sword Emperor and a 5-star heaven. Beetlejuice asked him if he saw who he was and then introduced himself, stating that he was a grandmaster among the 5-star heaven who could divide the mountains and the sea with the supremacy of the sword. Called Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice then displayed his power, causing the others to run away in fear because of the pressure. He remembered hearing about Beetlejuice and the 5-star heaven, referring to the 5 stars in the sky of the Nurburg continent. It was the title given to the 5 masters who had reached the mastery level, meaning encountering a named class expert in such a remote countryside was impossible. He then remembered that he first met his master Deus in a forest, making him wonder if sparsely populated places were good spots to encounter geniuses. Beetlejuice leaned closer to him and asked if he was willing to accept him as his master. Surprised, he replied that it wasn't like that. He then asked why Beetlejuice considered him his disciple, but Beetlejuice responded, saying it was obvious, if he said he was his disciple, then he was. Beetlejuice then laughed, telling him that he could see he was a newbie who might not know much about the world. He added that he might not fully grasp the significance of the 5-star heaven and the Grandmasters, so he should let him explain. But he cut him off, saying he already knew everything, which made Beetlejuice ask what he just said. He replied that he already knew about the 5-star heaven, the 5 stars of the continents, and the 5 masters, and that he knew they were extremely powerful. Beetlejuice asked why he was reacting like that if he knew it so well. He then apologized and told Beetlejuice that he was a bit late because he already had a master he served. Beetlejuice was surprised at first but asked if that was supposed to mean something, telling him he should just abandon Deus and serve him instead. This made him angry, and he asked Beetlejuice to stop talking because his master was stronger than him and had taught him secret invincible techniques. Beetlejuice then asked if his master was a Samjon, a term referring to the 3 venerable beings, meaning great grandmasters. He replied no, saying his master was higher than that. Beetlejuice thought about someone being higher than a Samjon, and he told Beetlejuice he wasn't sure, but his master had said invincible. Beetlejuice was confused for a moment and sighed. He then grabbed his sword, laughingly telling him that he was amusing with his wordplay. He hit the ground, causing it to shatter and released a strong aura. Beetlejuice then told him that he was invincible and that he was arrogant, but he knew he had great respect for his master, so he wouldn't force him to be his disciple. However, he couldn't just let it go. Beetlejuice then pierced his sword close to him and proposed a bet, calling him an arrogant prospective disciple. The system then showed him an urgent quest. His mission was to win the bet against Beetlejuice of the 5-star heaven. If he lost the bet, he would become a disciple of Beetlejuice. When Beetlejuice was 26 years old, he walked the path of the strong, wielding a sword and easily destroying everything in his path. As a result of years of hard training, cutting through flesh and blood, he finally reached the level of mastery he had longed for when he turned 120 years old. However, in his heart, emptiness took a greater place than joy, making him wonder what that emptiness was and why he felt unsatisfied when he had achieved what he wanted. He then heard someone under a bridge and saw a master telling his disciple to relax his shoulders and focus. The master then asked his disciple if that was how he became the strongest swordsman, to which the disciple stutteringly replied yes. Beetlejuice realized that the emptiness in his heart was because he lacked a disciple. He understood that even the perfect skills he had created would become meaningless once he was dead, so he needed a disciple to inherit his skill system. That's why he traveled across the continent in search of a successor. However, while his disciples were good at using mana, their combat sense was lacking. Others had limitations in muscle strength, no matter how hard they tried. He was shocked when one of his disciples died from being hit by a carriage. Panicking, he thought that to raise a proper successor, he needed to teach them for at least 20 years, and at 130 years old, he didn't have much time left. Beetlejuice searched almost everywhere, with the only place left being Beerman territory. He then told him that at that moment, he came to the Beerman territory determined to catch even a stray, and the moment he saw him, he realized that the arrogant and cheeky fellow was destined to become his disciple. He furiously asked Beetlejuice what he had been talking about all that time and shouted that he had no intention of becoming his disciple. Beetlejuice simply asked if that wasn't why he was showing restraint and consideration to someone forcibly taking him. He told him that if he didn't want to be his disciple, he should win the bet. He thought Beetlejuice was wrong because he was an old man who didn't listen in the first place, and he really felt like he had stepped into a mess this time. He then wondered what he should do with the situation, knowing that he couldn't just brush off someone of Beetlejuice's caliber, and now he was stuck with a quest. Realizing he had no choice but to cooperate, he asked Beetlejuice what the bet was. Beetlejuice replied that the bet was to hit him, making him look at Beetlejuice in confusion and ask what he meant by it. Beetlejuice told him he had one chance, and whether it was a strike or magic, if Beetlejuice received even the slightest damage, it would be his victory. Beetlejuice also told him not to worry too much because, out of consideration for his current weakness, he would refrain from using mana and handle him barehanded, but proudly added that his body had been trained to the utmost limit, so there were no weaknesses in terms of physicality. He didn't want to do it but had no choice, and he wondered if he had heard right that Beetlejuice said he would be barehanded. Beetlejuice then told him that if he lacked confidence, it was not too late to become his disciple now. He asked Beetlejuice if he knew his name, but Beetlejuice confusedly replied that it was not really important and he'd get to know it eventually. He grabbed his mace and asked Beetlejuice if it was right that not even having curiosity about his name suggested a lack of interest in him as a person, and told him that he was just in need of a vessel to pass on his skills, not a disciple. He then activated his desperate defense, the scorn of the strong, and smash skills at the same time, telling Beetlejuice that he would rather die than become the disciple of such a person. Beetlejuice just told him that winning a bet was all about defeating such words. He responded that Beetlejuice need not worry because he had no intention of losing. He then leaped closer to Beetlejuice to attack. Beetlejuice noticed that he was predictable with his reckless movements, as he was dispersing debuff skills across one part of the body, aiming to weaken that area. Beetlejuice then closed his palm, thinking that such tricks only worked on mediocre individuals and that it was a piece of cake to counter if he just found the debuff body part. However, while Beetlejuice was trying to find where the debuff skill was applied, he was surprised to see that it was on his birdie. When he was in the range to attack, he hit Beetlejuice with all his might, causing Beetlejuice to scream in pain. The next moment was a strong explosion. The adventurers came out of the guild house, wondering what was happening and thinking it seemed like they were making a bet or something, but they couldn't see anything because of the dust. Nanbok then told Jericho that it was the first time he had seen T-Sung fight properly and asked if T-Sung was really at a similar level to them. Jericho replied that T-Sung didn't just defeat the Goblin Lord alone for no reason. Jericho was shocked when he saw Beetlejuice standing but then collapsing, making them ask in shock if Beetlejuice had died standing up. They checked Beetlejuice and noticed that he was unconscious rather than dead, and said that even though he had reached that level of mastery, it seemed he hadn't trained enough to withstand such a situation. He sighed, thinking that as a man, he felt a bit sorry for Beetlejuice, and told him that next time, he shouldn't be so reckless. He then wondered if it meant the quest was completed since he had won the bet. The system then showed that the quest was complete and he had won against Beetlejuice of the 5 celestial stars in a bet. It then asked him if he would like to receive the quest reward. Hamji asked him what was going on when he clicked yes and, still dizzy, asked again what was happening. He asked Hamji if he was okay, and Hamji called him a damn bastard of a master because his head was still throbbing in pain. He sighed and told Hamji not to worry because everything was resolved now, and they should get out of there before Beetlejuice woke up and bothered them again. He then remembered that he was about to do something, and Hamji asked him if he was right in saying earlier that they were going to the place where the Goblin Lord's body was. He replied that Hamji was right, and that he wanted to extract some blood before the body started to decay because it could fetch a good price. Hamji told him he was stingy, but he replied that he should just call him frugal, and they began to head to the Beerman entrance. Later, at the Sohoka ruins in the Makallan Kingdom, where a massive level 500 monster called the Python appeared 30 years ago, it had become a popular hunting ground for adventurers at levels 40 to 60. In the mercenary guild near the Sohoka ruins, adventurers were looking for party members to team up with. A lady struggled to find a party member, and a man asked her if they had a spot for a damage dealer, mentioning that he had also upgraded his weapon to a unique one. The lady responded that the dealer slots were all filled, so they were currently looking for a buffer. She then apologized to the man, who walked away pissed. Gosrin, an adventurer at level 40 with an elemental mage class, noticed that there were many people there, but no priests or buffers. She thought that it seemed like the people looking for party members were the same ones she had been seeing, which meant most of them were probably in a similar situation as hers. Frustrated, she looked around, thinking that today's hunting seemed doomed when she saw someone that brightened her mood. She guessed that the person seemed new there, making her wonder if he was a newbie. She then activated her rune of insight, knowing that she would never know if she didn't try. When she saw his status, she was surprised and immediately grabbed his arm while excusing herself. He looked back, and she asked him if he would like to party with them. Before that, in the real world, T-Sung had been at the bank. After depositing some money, he stretched his body, feeling tired. Since the incident in the Beerman territory, he had been dealing with things that had piled up in real life, most of which involved paying off his accumulated debts. He wondered why it felt like the interest had increased since his bank loan was 200 million won and his private loan was 100 million won. He realized that those loan sharks, who were usually causing a scene at his house, had been quiet lately. As he walked, he thought that no news was good news and hoped they wouldn't contact him again. While walking, he heard a car honk. When he looked back, he saw a man driving a luxury car asking a pretty lady if they should eat omakase today. He wondered how much a car like that would cost. He knew he had made a lot of money from the Goblin Lord quest this time, but he thought he had just gotten lucky. Low-level players like him didn't get many quests that paid well. He also knew that BNW was a world with extreme polarization, just like in real life. On the other hand, after level 200, many quests that allowed for obtaining expensive and rare items became available. Additionally, there were zeal merchants that helped low-level users. If they had good physical and mental abilities, they could become pro gamers, and if they had a knack for broadcasting, they could also become game streamers. He knew that, in the end, they would eventually make money as long as they grew. For now, he was just a poor capsule without a VR capsule, but someday, he swore that he too would own a nice foreign car, live in a penthouse, and even get married to a beautiful wife. Back in the game, he was stunned when he saw Gosrin's beauty. Hamji had to slap him and ask why he had been spacing out and if he was having a strange delusion. He apologized and explained that he was just thinking for a bit. He then asked her what she was saying, and she replied that her party was looking for a buffer or a priest. If he didn't have a party, he should join theirs. He realized that she had seen his class and, since he was a debuff master, she probably thought he was a support class. He then wondered what kind of stupid thoughts he was having and apologized to her, saying he was planning to go alone. But then Hamji stopped him and told her that they would join her party. He panicked and whispered to Hamji, asking what he meant by saying they'd join. Hamji angrily told him that he was clueless and that the green light was a thumbs up. He asked Hamji what that even meant, but Hamji just asked if he was planning to spend his whole life going solo, adding that his expression earlier looked like he could already see his grandchildren. He told Hamji that he didn't think that far ahead. He knew that he couldn't keep hiding his skills forever, while Hamji insisted he should just listen to him. He then asked her if he was just supposed to cast debuffs from behind. She leaned closer to him, agreeing, and told him that their damage dealers were all ready, so he could just relax and apply debuffs. She then asked him again, with her pretty crystal eyes, if he would join them. He couldn't resist her beauty and agreed, telling her that he'd be in her care. A moment later, he followed them to the Sohoka Ruins west outskirts. He knew that the Sohoka Ruins were once a prosperous metropolis, but that unfortunate city was reduced to ruins 30 years ago due to the fall and rampage of a lightning python. The python was eventually defeated, but the vast amount of mana it possessed seeped into the earth, causing the natural occurrence of light attribute monsters. This made him realize why light attribute monsters were the main ones there. One of the men called Gosrin and whispered to her that it was good she found a debuffer, but he thought his level was too low since he was only level 31. She replied that they were the ones doing the fighting and guessed it would be fine if he just applied debuffs from behind. If anything happened, she would cover for them, so he shouldn't worry too much. The man sighed and told her that he couldn't tell if she was a bit off or just a kind person because he had played with buffers and healers before, but this was his first time with a debuffer, so he was a bit hesitant. She apologized to the man and explained that it wasn't easy to find buffers or priests, but since they were already in a party together, they should do their best. Suddenly, she noticed something and pushed the man next to her down, making them avoid the attack in time. He noticed that it was one of the monsters created due to the python's mana, called lizardlings. These spirit-type monsters were born from the mana left behind by the lightning python and attacked humans in groups, so they had to be careful when dealing with them. They were level 35 with a special feature of light attribute attacks. She shouted to everyone to get ready for battle and called out to a man named Itzy, telling him she would take the center and they should split up. She then ordered the tankers to cover the monster in front. She peeked back at him and told him that he could use his debuff skills from behind them, to which he replied yes. The lizardlings attacked at the same time, and the tankers blocked their attacks while Gosrin and Itzy were fighting. However, the male tanker swung his sword at the lizardlings, making the female tanker ask if it was really okay to fight head-on without any protection, even if he was a tank. The man arrogantly replied that it didn't hurt that much and it was enough to just tank, hit, and kill them. The man then peeked at him and said there was no one to buff or heal them, wondering why they even brought that puny debuffer when there was no need to debuff those little scrubs. One of the men shouted that he'd handle all the tanking and they should finish quickly and go hunt something stronger, unaware that he had a target mark. The man was confused when strong lightning struck him from different directions. He gasped for air for a moment but eventually died. The female tanker was then surprised to see a swarm of lizardlings around them. She shouted, asking if there had been that many before, and told them that there were too many of them. Gosrin told them they should retreat the way they came, but Itzy shouted that the rear was already surrounded too. Gosrin realized that there hadn't been that many before and knew she had been too careless. She took out her 3 escape scrolls, but knew they had 4 people and guessed she would have to stay. He told her to keep the scrolls, saying that escape scrolls were pretty expensive these days, so they shouldn't waste them on him and that she shouldn't sacrifice herself. She was confused and asked what he meant by that. He replied that she seemed like the type to do it and he understood that she was kind and considerate, but being too nice could make her look like a fool or a sucker, so she should keep the escape scroll for herself. She was about to explain that if she ran away, they would die, but he just asked why she would run away and pulled his hand out of his pocket. He then snapped his fingers and told her that it wasn't even dangerous right now. They were all shocked when he applied the weakening curse in desperate defense on the monster. When everything was settled, he told them that now that the debuffs were applied, they should go in for the kill. They then proceeded to attack the lizardlings. The female tanker was busy shielding everyone while Itzy, hyped up, jumped toward one side and easily slashed every single lizardling in his path. Itzy was surprised that they were so weak that a few normal attacks were enough to kill them. He clapped his hands to get their attention and told them that he knew they were excited. But the monster's attack powers were still the same. If they let their guard down, they'd end up like the tank who died earlier, which Itzy agreed to. He smiled, thinking it wasn't as bad as he thought. Even if he was just staying back and applying debuffs, he was getting a lot of experience points, making him wonder if he should just become a debuffer and soak up experience points. Suddenly, he heard Gosrin shouting at him to be careful. Fortunately, Gosrin appeared in time to block an attack from behind. She asked him if he was okay, and he thanked her, saying he was fine. He then noticed that Gosrin's agility was no joke and thought that if she had chosen a rogue or archer class, her level would have been even higher. It was a shame she chose the mage class. After their fight, they were all happy to have leveled up. They joked that if someone saw how easily they leveled up, they would think they used cheats. He asked if they enjoyed the hunt, noting that they seemed uninterested in him earlier, but he was glad they all seemed satisfied now. Itzy walked closer to him, asking why he sounded so down, and told him that he had believed in him until the end. The female tanker then told him that buffs and heals couldn't even compare to his debuffs. It was a whole new world. Itzy asked the female tanker how she dared compare Tsung to those scrubs, making him think how pathetic it was and why buffers often got screwed over. The woman then said it was the first time she had seen a class that specialized in debuffs and asked if he was sure it wasn't a hidden class. He jumped a little in shock and awkwardly replied that there weren't any hidden classes and he would have already joined a big guild if that were the case. Itzy then asked what his class was and he replied that it was a unique class, but it could only debuff and couldn't do anything else. Itzy told him he understood and asked if it was a new class. He knew that all classes had 4 grades: normal, legendary, mythic, and unique. Since his second job change, he couldn't distinguish between the grades, making him wonder if he had overused his skills. He realized he needed to be more careful in the future. Gosrin then ran to him and handed him the lowest grade light crystal, a crystal formed from the energy left behind by the lightning python. It contained faint light energy. She told him that they all gathered it while hunting earlier to give it to him. He was confused and asked if that wasn't too much. She replied that they usually gave all the crystals to the buffers after the hunt, and they were giving it to him because they hunted comfortably thanks to him. He accepted it gratefully, telling her that if that was the case, he'd gratefully accept it. Then, she held his hand and asked if he would continue to hunt with them and if she was right in assuming he'd help them. He sighed and told her that finding a party was a lot of work, so he would. She excitedly told the others that Tisung said he would continue hunting with them. Watching them be happy, he smiled and thought that, for the first time in a long time, living an ordinary life like this was okay. But Hamji told him that he knew it was because of a woman and that he shouldn't let it get to him, making Tisung ask Hamji to shut up. A week passed since they joined the party. At the Adventurer's Rest, an inn with a view of Sohoka, someone asked if they should disperse there today. Gosrin told them they worked hard today too and should go again tomorrow. He held the door, thinking that there were no special events or big harvests like when he got the Beerman Territory quest. He had been safely leveling up and unlocking new auxiliary skills, reaching a small achievement. Hamji then asked if he was going to do that today and return to the other world. Tisung replied, of course, saying he couldn't let the newly learned skills go to waste. He then told Hamji that first, they should take out the crystal fragments they got from hunting today. He activated his attribute absorption skill, and the system showed that he absorbed 0.36 light attribute energy from the lowest grade light crystal, increasing his light attribute resistance by 0.36. After he reached level 35, he gained a new support skill, attribute absorption. This skill allowed him to absorb attribute energy, which increased his resistance to that attribute. If he absorbed enough energy, it would also strengthen his other skills. On the surface, it seemed like a simple resistance boosting ability, but he knew it had hidden depths. The challenge was that he didn't know the exact amount of energy needed for the skill enhancement, leaving him to slowly increase his absorption, wondering when the breakthrough would happen. He decided it was time to stop party hunting. He needed to level up just once more to learn a new skill, which he guessed would happen the next day. However, when Gosrin asked him if he would hunt with her, he immediately agreed without thinking. Later, he lay on the sofa, feeling defeated, and swore to level up tomorrow. The next morning, he woke up, yawned, and came out of his room, asking if everyone was gathered together. When no one answered, he opened his eyes and saw a large crowd of adventurers. Confused, he asked Hamji why so many people were there, but Hamji replied that he didn't know either. One of the adventurers saw him and shouted, "It's the Debuff Master." The crowd rushed towards him, each person vying to form a party with him, arguing about who asked first. Panicked, he wondered if these people were crazy. Suddenly, someone grabbed his wrist tightly. It was Gosrin, pulling him away at high speed. He asked if it was really her, but she just told him to hold on tight and activate the 2 scrolls she was holding. The system indicated that she used a return scroll to teleport to a designated location, and they both vanished. They reappeared at a familiar place, and Gosrin complained about never getting used to the feeling of teleporting. He asked if they were back where they first went hunting as a party. She replied that she didn't expect to return there but was glad she had set the return scroll destination. He asked her what the hell was going on, and she showed him a system message while telling him she thought he should see it first. He read the news, which included videos and captions stating that when the debuffer laid down the zone, the mobs just melted away. The news claimed that bringing 1 debuffer could be twice as effective for hunting compared to bringing 2 buffers. He was surprised to see it. Gosrin explained that the video of their party hunting had spread through the community. She began to speculate about who might have filmed it, but he interrupted, saying he knew it was Itzy, who was now conspicuously absent from the video. She agreed and informed him that Itzy had already left the party. She suspected Itzy filmed it secretly while leaving for another area, and then uploaded it to the community. She wondered aloud why Itzy would do that and admitted she had no idea. He was frustrated that Itzy had called him Hyung, meaning brother, but had betrayed him. He remembered how close he and Jinwoo had been before Jinwoo tried to kill him, bringing back painful memories and causing him to curse in anger. Gosrin apologized, saying she shouldn't have forced him to form a party with them. He reassured her that it was okay and that Itzy was the bad guy, so she did nothing wrong. He then thanked her for saving him. Gosrin asked him what he planned to do now. He replied that he was going to level up one more time and then leave, as he didn't think he could stay with all the rumors spreading. She was silent for a moment, biting her lip, then suddenly shouted his name. He looked back at her, confused, and she asked if he would like to form a party with her, just the two of them. A moment later, they were walking while Gosrin told him that there had been a lot of monsters when she first came here, but today it was quiet with none around. She looked at him and asked if it was because his debuff wiped them all out, making him laugh awkwardly in response. He felt awkward because he hadn't expected they would end up forming a party, just the two of them. It was even more uncomfortable since she had been irritated earlier, making him wonder if he should have done it alone. But he couldn't refuse when she suggested it with such a bright face. Hamji then asked if he agreed with him, prompting him to ask what Hamji meant. Hamji whispered that it was a vibe, a connection. He tried to grab Hamji, who jumped away, angrily asking if Hamji was teasing him again, and mentioning that Hamji had been quiet lately, so he wondered if something good had happened. Hamji teasingly responded that he was quick on the uptake except when it came to girls, and the reason he was feeling good was that he thought he was finally going to get his first skill. He then told Hamji that he remembered if his level went up, Hamji's would too, so he should be able to unlock skills. He asked to check which skill it was. Gosrin appeared next to him and asked if it was a pet skill, surprising him. She explained that such skills don't usually appear unless it's a high-tier pet, which amazed her. Hamji told her not to make him uncomfortable with that kind of talk, making her confused. Hamji then proudly said that he was originally a great spirit of the forest and made a contract with his master as equals, so he was not just a pet. She apologized to Hamji, explaining that she thought he was just a pet because he called T-Sun master. Hamji was taken aback and explained in a panic that it was a title they had no choice but to use in business relationships. Meanwhile, T-Sun was looking at the smiling Gosrin, who's asking Hamji if she could call him Hamji too. He then asked her why she treated him so well and if it was because he was a good debuffer. She replied that it wasn't entirely wrong, but first of all, he was good looking. He initially agreed, but then, realizing what she said, he was shocked and shouted in panic, asking her to repeat herself. She laughingly told him she was just kidding and asked if he had a knack for teasing. He shyly replied that he was more mischievous than he thought, while Hamji looked at them, thinking it was very interesting. She then seriously admitted that she initially approached him because of his debuffing abilities, but now there was another reason. He asked what that reason was, and she replied simply that she had become interested in him, not as the debuff master, but as the gamer T-Sun. He told her that he wasn't that great of a person, but she insisted that even if he wasn't great, he was still a good person. She could tell from watching his gameplay over the past week. Not only did he use debuff skills, but he also meticulously took care of each team member's position, equipment condition, and potions. She had never seen a buffer take care of team members to that extent. He was stunned, knowing those were just habits from his time as a guild leader. She then told him that was why she became curious about what kind of person he was in real life. He replied that he understood, but she didn't need to be curious about him. Just as he was about to reveal something about himself, the ground beneath them collapsed. He panicked, asking what was happening as she tried to reach for him, calling his name while the ground continued to collapse. The system then showed him that he was in a stunned state and would recover after 5 seconds. When the 5 seconds passed, he woke up gasping and sat up, wondering what had caused the ground to suddenly collapse. He heard someone from behind asking if he was awake. When he looked back, he saw Gosrin and Hamji walking closer to him. Hamji teasingly told him that he had finally woken up and called him Weakling Master. He was surprised to see Gosrin's injured shoulder, but she replied that it was nothing serious. Hamji explained that when he fell earlier, Gosrin had shielded him and got hit by debris. He apologized, feeling like he was a burden, but she assured him it was okay and not a big deal. She then told him she had taken a potion earlier, so she was recovering. She then seriously asked him if he saw it while looking at their side, and a moment later they arrived at the underground Sohoker ruins, Osric cult's laboratory. He told her that he had never heard of the Osric cult, and she replied that she hadn't either. She noticed a lot of suspicious things, countless corpses of soldiers and lizardlings. She speculated that the horde of lizardlings they encountered last time might be related to this place, though she had never heard of a dungeon like this in the Sohoker ruins. He asked if she guessed it was a hidden dungeon. A hidden dungeon is exactly what it sounds like, a secret dungeon with special monsters and quests, like Garugo the Goblin Lord. He knew this meant the reward would also be special, and Gosrin noticed his eyes sparkling. She worriedly asked if the two of them would be okay, reminding him that hidden dungeons are considerably hard to clear. Before he could respond, he pointed down and told her someone was coming out. They saw a man stumble out and collapse on the floor after a few steps. They looked at each other and rushed down to heal the man. The man thanked them, and T-Sung asked what had happened. The man replied that he was a member of a secret society called the Guardians. He and his colleagues were dispatched to investigate the Osric cult, an evil group in the Sohoker ruins, but the cult members were stronger than expected, forcing him to flee. The man then shouted that there was still a chance and, though it was shameless, they were the only ones who could help. He begged them to thwart the conspiracy of the Osric cult. T-Sung confirmed that this was indeed a hidden quest and asked how they could do it. The man explained that they had to destroy 5 orbs in the cult's research lab. If they didn't, a disaster would be resurrected. Suddenly, men rushed towards them to attack. Gosrin worriedly told him that these were Osric cult members. T-Sung grabbed his mace from his inventory and told her he would handle them while she protected the man. She protested, saying it wasn't possible with just his debuff skills. He told her that she got hurt because of him, so he had to take responsibility. He then asked her to make a promise. She asked what it was, and he replied that from now on, she couldn't take any videos or photos of him. He also made her promise not to spread what happened there. As the men closed in, he turned around swiftly and easily attacked the 3 men, shocking Gosrin. He then confidently told her he would clear this secret dungeon. The system showed him his hidden quest, thwart the conspiracy of the Osric cult. His mission was to destroy the energy orbs in the Osric cult's research lab to thwart their conspiracy. The system warned him that if he didn't destroy the energy orbs in time, disaster would resurrect. A minute later, one of the cult members was slammed into the wall. The man asked if they were guardians or adventurers. T-Sung replied that he didn't need to know and demanded to know where the lab was. He then sat down in front of the man, telling him he'd spare his life if he answered. But the man laughed and declared that the Osric cult members never begged for their lives. He shouted that they were foolish heretics who would soon regret entering their research lab with such desires. T-Sung stood up, acknowledging the man's loyalty, noting that no matter how much he pried, the man would only recite scriptures. The cultist stutteringly claimed that even torture wouldn't change his answer. T-Sung lifted his mace, asking why he would torture him when it was too cruel. He explained that he just wanted to relieve stress and hadn't fought in a while, so his body was itching for a fight. He then smiled creepily, his mace ready to strike, and told the man he hoped his loyalty wouldn't waver as he just wanted to break something. The cultist quickly revealed that if T-Sung went inside, there was a fork in the road. Going straight and then right would lead to their research lab. Frustrated, T-Sung hit the man in the head, knocking him out. He then told Gosrin they should go since they now knew the location. She approached him, about to ask something when he preemptively asked if she was about to question why he hid his strength. He told her he would explain everything after the quest and asked her to wait until then. She sighed and agreed. As they walked inside the lab, she made him promise to tell her later, which he did, unaware that the man who claimed to be a guardian was silently watching from behind. Meanwhile, in the research lab, various species were contained in tubes. A few Osric cult members lay dead on the floor while others were busy cleaning the bodies and working. The high priest of the Osric cult, Romulus, looked at a formula, frustrated. He declared that he couldn't use it and then asked the Guardian if they had nothing better to do than interfere with their research until the very end. The Guardian shouted that their purpose was to protect the world and that they, the Guardians, would not tolerate the cult's evil plot. The man was about to say something more, but a sharp sword swung at his neck, and before he could finish his words, Romulus slashed his throat. Romulus then ordered his members to clean up, which they immediately followed. He asked the bald man what had happened to the Guardian who had escaped earlier. The bald man replied that other evangelists were chasing him, and since he was seriously injured, he probably couldn't have gotten far. Romulus laughed, thinking the Guardians were pitiful for trying to stop them and failing. Romulus then stared at the successful machine, telling the Guardians to watch from the afterlife because the revival of the demon god, who would ring the holy bells of their church, was imminent. Suddenly, someone cast a strong flame magic circle, causing a fire shot to hit the machine and shatter it into pieces. Romulus was shocked at first and then shouted in horror when he realized everything they had worked hard for was destroyed. He snapped when someone asked what was wrong, and he saw T-Sung telling Gosrin she made a nice shot. Romulus demanded to know who they were and if they were Guardians. T-Sung responded, asking why everyone he met kept asking that, and stated that he was a saboteur. Romulus wondered if they had taken down all the priests outside and ordered his people to increase the output, stating that since the intruders had broken in, they needed to start the resurrection ritual right away. The cult members then began to activate the machines and make the magic power flow to the wires. The magic power headed to the main machine, and the system showed T-Sung that the resurrection ritual had begun. He had 5 minutes to destroy all 5 orbs to prevent the resurrection of the boss monster and had currently destroyed 1. The timer began to count down, and Gosrin panicked, realizing it was a time attack quest. T-Sung told her to focus on destroying the remaining orbs while he handled the rest. She asked if he was sure he could do it alone, and he replied that there weren't many cultists left, so he could manage. He thought that Romulus might be a bit annoying, but he knew he could handle it. He then headed towards the cultists, telling Gosrin to take care of the orbs. Romulus ordered his men to punish Tsung, calling him an insolent heretic. His followers appeared on either side of Tsung. One attacked from one side while the other attacked from the other, but Tsung fortunately blocked and dodged in time. He then elbowed one of the men and swung his mace at the bald man, hitting him away while shouting for him to get out of his way. Just then, the man he had elbowed appeared behind him, ready to attack, but Tsung blocked it easily. Suddenly, a strong green power surged towards him, shocking him as it caused a strong explosion. The man was in pain because Tsung had used him as a shield. Tsung asked Romulus if using a wide area attack when he had subordinates nearby was a bit too much, but Romulus replied that it wasn't something someone who used people as shields should say. Romulus admitted that Tsung was strong, with a high level of battle sense and situational judgment. Tsung retorted that Romulus was a tough opponent to face alone, and since there were no more fighters left but him, asked if Romulus was going to surrender. Romulus just smiled and asked when Tsung had ever seen him alone. Suddenly, Tsung felt something trying to grab him from behind. He immediately swung his mace and saw that it was a spirit. He wondered if it was a ghost, realizing it came from the man he had used as a shield. Romulus then introduced himself as the High Priest of the Great Osric cult and the Dark Priest. He explained that the spirits of the dead were his power and that as long as there were corpses by his side, Tsung could not defeat him. The spirits of the dead then surrounded Romulus, who declared that Tsung would also die and become part of his power. Tsung saw that Romulus was level 55, ranked as named, with a special ability called Shadow of the Dead. The spirits then flew towards Tsung to attack him, so he ran away at high speed while they chased after him. He forcefully turned his body and slashed at them with his mace, but the spirits simply reassembled themselves and pierced through his body. He noticed that his health decreased every time they passed through him, making him wonder if it was a summoned debuff. Realizing that physical attacks were useless, he knew that dragging the fight out would mean certain defeat. He checked his remaining time, 3 minutes and 12 seconds, realizing he had to end the situation quickly. He looked at Romulus, suspecting that he was stalling for time. Romulus, controlling the spirits, laughed and called Tsung a fool, saying he wouldn't be able to catch his race with such flimsy attacks. Tsung jumped towards Romulus, activated his smash skill, and declared he would just have to hit him directly. He struck Romulus, who blocked with his sword but was thrown back by the force of the attack. Tsung teased Romulus, asking if he would block the next attack with his face. Romulus, whose sword shattered from the impact, furiously called him a heretic and once again controlled the spirits, shouting that he would kill him. The spirits surrounded Tsung, wrapping around him like a tornado. Romulus taunted Tsung, saying he could thrash around all he wanted but wouldn't be able to defeat him or prevent the resurrection of disaster. Just then, the system notified Tsung that he had achieved level 45 and could now use the new skill, Flying Spur. He immediately used it, knowing it would throw a weapon at a designated enemy. The spur pierced through the tornado of spirits, causing them to disappear. Romulus, surprised, asked what it was. Tsung replied that it was divine punishment and controlled the spur to attack Romulus, successfully hitting him in the stomach. Romulus was slammed into one of the machines and died as the mace pierced his body. Tsung retrieved his mace, saying that controlling the spur was easier than he thought and wishing he had used it sooner. He then looked around, knowing that the only thing left to do was to smash the orbs. On the other hand, Gosrin was busy hitting the orbs with her fire. She was glad that there were only 2 orbs left and told herself to hold on a little longer while focusing on destroying them. But then, the bald man appeared behind her and shouted, asking if she could just stop already. He grabbed her shoulder, and she clenched her teeth in pain because he tightly gripped her injured shoulder. She saw that she only had 1 minute and 20 seconds to destroy the orbs, making her panic. Suddenly, a mace flew in their direction at high speed and destroyed one of the orbs. The man panicked when he saw this, but then a fist appeared in his face, knocking him down instantly. Gosrin was happy to see her ally, and he told her that she looked like she was in a lot of pain, asking if it was hard to aim with her shoulder injury. She sadly admitted that she kept getting in the way and apologized. But he reassured her that there was no need to apologize. After all, she had to destroy the remaining orb. She tried to resist, but he explained that his skill was now on cooldown and the orb couldn't be destroyed with ordinary attacks. They had to rely on her magic. She stayed silent, prompting him to tell her that if it were him, he would at least try. Whether he succeeded or not, the time would keep ticking. He asked her what they should do. She panicked and replied that she understood and would try. She then aimed at the last orb, telling him not to blame her too much if she missed. With only 15 seconds remaining, she gathered fire magic on her staff. At 13 seconds, she shakily aimed at the last orb, begging it to hit. With 10 seconds left, he held her hand and helped her aim. At 6 seconds, they both looked at each other, and at 4 seconds, she smiled confidently. With 3 seconds remaining, she released her fire magic at the last orb. In the final second, her magic rushed towards the orb, but then Romulus, who they thought was dead, appeared to shield it. Unfortunately, Romulus managed to block the attack and protect the last orb. Both of them were surprised as Romulus shouted that he was Romulus and that he would bring disaster to the world before collapsing. The system then showed them that the time limit had been exceeded, and they had failed to prevent the revival of the boss monster. It warned them to get ready because the boss monster would awaken soon. The huge mirror behind the last orb released a strong light magic power. He covered his face, frustratingly calling Romulus a zombie-like bastard and cursing himself for not finishing Romulus off properly. He was then stunned in shock when he saw the huge snake in front of him. The system revealed that it was a hidden quest named Disaster Eradication, and their mission was to defeat the revived Disaster, the Lightning Python. The Lightning Python growled loudly, and he wondered if when those bastards talked about resurrecting Disaster, they were referring to this python. However, he noticed it was smaller than he expected. He remembered that ancient legends described it as a giant serpent capable of wrapping around a large mountain and still having something left over. The one in front of them was big, but only about 20 meters long. The system then showed him that the Lightning Python was a monster resurrected through the evil experiments of the Osric cult. It was a being from a different world that turned Sohoka, once a prosperous city, into ruins in just one night. Its level was 70, species unknown, grade boss, class Lightning Buster, and its special ability was Charged Breath. Gosrin told him that it seemed like those Osrics couldn't fully resurrect it because of the destroyed orbs. However, with a level of 70, they should still run for now. She asked him if she was right that they wouldn't fight it, but he just apologized to her and explained that he couldn't resist something that rare. He said he'd take care of it, so she should run first. She simply drank a potion, confusing him, and gave one to him, explaining that it was a potion for resistance to elemental attacks. It was a low-level potion, so it might not be much help, but it was better than nothing. He accepted it and confusedly called her name, but she just told him that he was right. Since they had come this far, they couldn't miss out on such a rare experience. She then told him that she'd protect him and that they should fight together till the end. He agreed but warned her that even if they died there, he wouldn't take responsibility. The python launched its attack at them, but they both jumped away in time to avoid it. He then forced himself to face it, thinking that given its size, it was surprisingly fast, meaning they couldn't afford to relax. It turned towards his position with speed and tried to bite him. Fortunately, he jumped away in time and leaped above it. He then decided to see how it could handle a heavy blow. Activating his desperate defense skill, which decreased enemy defense and magic resistance, he then activated his smash skill. He attacked with triple strikes, but the python raised its tail and tried to squeeze him to death from behind. He dodged just in time but was surprised when he saw it aiming at him. The system warned him that the python was using Charged Breath. Gosrin then appeared at the python's side and attacked its head with her fire magic just in time, causing its head to move upward and miss him by an inch. As the python continuously attacked them with lightning breath, they managed to get away. She rushed to him when he fell to the floor and asked if he was okay. Holding his painful head, he replied that he had barely dodged it but was fine. She remarked that it sounded like a genuine cry of pain just now, and he begged her to pretend she didn't hear it. He opened his eyes and saw the destruction around him, realizing that no matter how weakened it was, a hidden boss was still a hidden boss, and its attacks were certainly at a disaster level. She told him that if it unleashed another attack like that, the entire lab might collapse, so they needed to finish it quickly before it gathered more strength. He agreed but noted that it didn't seem like the python was going to wait for them, as it was protecting its body with a charged barrier and had increased its magic resistance by 200%. The system then warned them that approaching the charged barrier would result in electrocution and paralysis. He noticed that the python was pouring mana into the charged breath while reinforcing the barrier, gathering strength again. He sighed in frustration, knowing it was an annoyingly relentless pattern. She asked what they should do because, with that status, magic wouldn't work, and getting close for a melee attack would likely cause paralysis. He told her that it wasn't hopeless, which confused her. He explained that this was exactly when they should use debuffs. He snapped his fingers to activate his weakening curse, which gradually decreased the health and mana of enemies. The curse appeared beneath the python, shocking it. The charged barrier then shattered, and the system showed them that the python had gone into a frenzy due to intense pain, lifting the charged barrier. She was surprised that the barrier was broken. He replied that no matter how high its magic resistance, it would still feel the same fixed damage. He smiled, knowing that with the forced release of the charged barrier, the python probably couldn't gather mana properly and must have lost a significant amount of health. He then ran toward it, thinking that it should be enough, making Gosrin call his name and worry. The python gathered power in its mouth once again and released balls of lightning in his direction, but he speedily dodged them while heading toward it. He jumped and hit its body with his smash skill, but then it launched its tail to attack him from behind. He immediately used his speed regulation skill, wrapping around the python while asking it if it thought he'd fall for the same pattern again. He then launched himself at its head, calling it a stubborn python. It tried to decrease his damage, but he used his Scorn of the Strong skill to counterattack. He successfully slashed the python, cracking its whole body. He smiled when he read that the 4th the Osric cult's conspiracy quest was cleared. When he got down, he saw the python slashed in half with a torn body, and the system showed him to collect his rewards from the python's corpse. He also leveled up, reaching level 46. He was disappointed because he thought he could gain at least 2 levels, but he only got 1, making him wonder how long it would take to reach level 200. He thought the experience points were disappointing, but the rewards were decent. Gosrin then ran to him and said she couldn't believe he actually killed it. He replied that it was all thanks to her and that she worked hard. But she knew he was lying, as she was sure he would have defeated it on his own without her help. Meanwhile, he was busy wondering why they hadn't received the rewards yet. Gosrin knew that even with debuffs, it would take 5 high-level players over level 70 to take down the lightning python, yet T-Sun, who was barely level 45, was able to do it alone. He then called her name, snapping her out of her thoughts, and she apologized for zoning out. She explained that she was thinking about something else for a moment and asked if they should check the rewards quickly. He replied no, saying that before they checked the rewards, there was an important issue remaining. She was surprised and asked if he was still hiding something, but he simply asked if she happened to have any rubber gloves, confusing her. He then explained that no matter how he looked at it, it seemed like they would need to dismantle the python to get the reward. He grumbled about the developers needing to improve stuff like that, making her agree that it was indeed an important issue. A moment later, they had acquired the python's scales, blood, flesh, bones, and fang. She commented that even after picking out only the best items, it was still a lot, and large bosses were definitely worth the trouble. Exhausted, he told her that the only problem was their size. She guessed he wasn't satisfied with the rewards. He was pissed because, after dissecting it, the rewards were just those things, and he was so disappointed because it was a hidden dungeon boss. He then looked at what they got from the python, knowing that the only useful thing was the python's core. It was a lump of energy that the lightning python held within and contained a large amount of light attribute energy. It was also consumable. He knew that if he absorbed that core, he wouldn't have to work as hard anymore. But there was only one, so he couldn't split it, all the while looking at a confused Gosrin. He walked closer to her and said he felt a bit awkward saying this because she did her part, but in his honest opinion, he thought he played a bigger role. However, he didn't have the conscience to monopolize all the rewards for himself. He then picked up the core and told her he would just take that insignificant python's core and she should take the rest. Silence fell between them, and she laughed at his words, making him guess that his quick fix plan didn't work. He then asked her why she was laughing all of a sudden, saying it was creepy, but she told him that the more she observed him, the more interesting he became. She said he didn't have to be so considerate and that he should take all the rewards, which confused him. She then asked if he remembered when they went on party hunts before, where she would gather experience points and bring back rewards for him. She told him to think of this as the same thing, so he shouldn't worry about it. She also said that she felt rewarded enough just by completing the quest together with him. It was the most worthwhile quest she had ever been on, one she would probably never forget. He wondered if it was that great and told her that if she insisted, there was nothing else he could do about it. He didn't expect it to happen and admitted that it was too much to put in his inventory, so it would be better to split them. Suddenly, Hamji appeared, asking if it was finally time for him to come out. He asked Hamji if he was trying to steal the leftovers and reminded him that he was hiding because it smelled when he was dissecting the python. Hamji replied that he was a clueless owner and still didn't understand why his body was so awesome. Hamji then put his hands together in the air and tore something open above him, which turned into clothing. Hamji proudly told him to look, to which he replied that he was looking. Hamji then modeled the bag while explaining that it was his new magic called the Infinite Bag. He grabbed Hamji by the bag and asked if it was the new skill he had learned. He then told Hamji that it looked like an old-fashioned wrapping cloth, while Hamji shouted at him to let go. But then he saw a wide space galaxy inside Hamji's bag, making him ask what it was. Hamji replied that he had never seen that before either. The system then showed that it was called Pick It Up, an infinite bag, a magical bag summoned using Hamji's skill. It was an artifact of the spirit world that embodied the void of the world of nothingness. It also explained that since it was an item embodying the void, the storage capacity was infinite, and Hamji could wrap that void bag around his back and store items within it. He was shocked that it had infinite capacity, knowing that one of the problems ordinary users often have trouble with is the limitation of their inventory space. Having that skill could solve it all at once. He then grabbed Hamji and happily told him that he was finally earning his keep. Hamji replied that when it came to stealing the show, he was always ready. He asked Hamji if he wanted some snacks and said he'd treat him today, but then they heard someone approaching. The guardian man from before appeared and guessed that they actually defeated the python. They were both shocked by his presence. He immediately turned around with his mace, asking the person behind them who he was, as he hadn't felt his presence at all. The man laughed and told him not to misunderstand because he wasn't an enemy. He was surprised to see that it was the guardian from before and mentioned that he was the wounded guardian he saw earlier. The man was stunned and laughed hard, guessing that he was still in that form, and explained that he had been trying to make a grand entrance but now felt a bit embarrassed. The man then slowly changed to his original appearance while telling him that it was good to see him. He couldn't believe it when he saw the man change into someone else and asked if he was right, that he was Han Tisung. He jumped toward the man and pointed his mace closer to the man's face, demanding to know who he was. The man simply replied that he'd know if he used the rune of insight and introduced himself as Chen Wu-jin. Tisung ordered Wu-jin to tell him his identity right now and asked how he knew his name. But Wu-jin just asked if he was the type who acted before he thought while reaching for his mace. Wu-jin then told him that even with the rune of insight, there was no way for him to check his information and released a strong aura that pushed Tisung away. He then realized that he had momentarily forgotten that if the level difference was too overwhelming, they could hide their information. Wu-jin asked if he should have lowered his power a bit more. Tisung asked Wu-jin why a strong guy like him approached him in disguise and if his purpose could be more than just showing off his strength to a mere level 46 user. Wu-jin laughed and apologized for what happened just now, explaining that he was the one acting before thinking. Wu-jin told him that there was actually no big reason, he was just interested in him. This made Tisung ask if he really said he was interested in a small fry player like him. Wu-jin told him honestly that he might be a small fry player, but he was not a normal user, and called him Deus only disciple, leaving Tisung stunned in shock. He was horrified when he asked Wu-jin how he knew about it, but Wu-jin just laughed and told him not to worry because he was the only one who knew about Deus. If Tisung wanted to hear more, he should come to Sinsadong, and Wu-jin would contact him separately soon. Wu-jin then looked back and apologized for ruining the fun atmosphere while looking at Gosrin, who silently looked back. Wu-jin smiled upon seeing this and left, telling them to enjoy the rest of their date. Tisung's hands shook, thinking that his identity had been exposed by someone incredibly powerful. He wondered if the other rankers knew about him too. Wu-jin said he was the only one who knew about his master Deus, but Tisung wondered if he could believe those words right away and if Genesis also knew his identity. He was fearful because he had just gotten started and wondered if it would end like this. But then Gosrin grabbed his face, shocking and confusing him. She told him that she didn't know anything and that even if she heard something, she wouldn't be interested. Also, she didn't take any videos or screenshots, so he shouldn't worry because he had nothing to worry about. Hamji then told him that if anything happened, he'd protect him, so he shouldn't be scared. He was surprised to hear it from them. He sighed and thanked both of them. After exiting the hidden dungeon, his party with Gosrin and Hamji came to an end. Gosrin told him that she'd stay at the ruins for a while to focus on leveling up. He hadn't logged into BNW since then. Even though Gosrin and Hamji reassured him, he couldn't rest, still feeling anxious that his information might have been exposed. He lay on his bed, not knowing what to do anymore, and decided to get some sleep. 3 days later, Tisung logged in and received an email from Wu-jin telling him to find Chen Wu-jin tonight, at midnight, at Club Heaven in Sinsadong. Hours later, he arrived in Sinsadong, Gangnam. He looked at his phone, thinking that Chen Wu-jin wasn't a normal guy, wondering why he would make an appointment at a club. He then looked around and realized that it had been a while since he wandered the streets at night. He had always just played games while others went out to have fun. He then stopped walking and arrived at the club. It was his first time at a club, making him wonder if he surely wouldn't get turned away at the door. But then the guard told him that he couldn't enter because of a dress code violation. He was still glad that at least he got turned away for a dress code violation, and not because of his looks. He then told the guard that he was not there to party, but just to meet someone briefly, and asked if he could just go in and out real quick. The guard just angrily stared at him, making him realize that it probably wouldn't work. The man behind him teasingly asked his partner who wears sweatpants to Club Heaven while looking at him. The lady laughed and told the man to stop whispering because he could hear him. But the man just put his finger up to him and told the lady that if he could hear him, he'd show him. The man then called him a bum and told him to stop causing trouble and get lost, making him clench his teeth in anger. Suddenly, a man grabbed his shoulder and asked if he had just arrived, advising him that he should have dressed a bit better. Tisung asked if the man was Chen Wu-jin. The guard then bowed in front of them and stutteringly apologized because he didn't know Tisung was Chen Wu-jin's friend. Wu-jin told the guard it was okay because Tisung was new to clubs. He added, somewhat jokingly, that if he were the guard, even he would have wanted to kick Tisung's ass. Tisung asked Wu-jin if it didn't sound like he was telling him to listen to him. He then followed Wu Jin inside the club, raising his finger back at the man who couldn't believe he knew Chen Wu Jin. Wu Jin glanced back at the man, who was stunned in horror. The lady asked the man what was wrong, and he replied that they were screwed and couldn't come to Sinsadong anymore. A moment later, they entered the club and saw many people dancing happily to the music. In the VIP room, Wu Jin asked Tisung what he wanted to drink and if he preferred Dom Perignon or Armand. Wu Jin then told him that if he didn't like champagne, he could prepare something else. Tisung replied that he didn't even know what those were and that he didn't come there to drink. Wu Jin then told him that if he wanted to dance, he should feel free to go out and dance. Tisung, frustrated, shouted if Wu Jin was intentionally trying to provoke him and reminded him that he had called him to come. Wu Jin poured some wine while laughing, saying Tisung's reaction was funny and made him feel like teasing him more. Tisung told Wu Jin not to get annoyed and just say it already, asking who exactly he was. Wu Jin told him that he had a lot to apologize for, including disrupting his last date, and asked him to let him explain a few things. Wu Jin then asked if Tisung remembered the person he had disguised as, revealing that the person was a real member who had escaped from the Osric research lab and died shortly afterward. That person had also been a member of the Guardians, like him. Tisung asked if Wu Jin was saying that he had disguised himself as a deceased comrade to deceive him. Wu Jin replied that he had no excuse for it and acknowledged that using a dead comrade was a betrayal of the Guardians. However, he thought it was worth it and, though he was sorry for them, he had no regrets. He told Wu Jin that he knew what he meant by worth it was because he was a disciple of Deus, the only disciple of Deus. Wu Jin replied that it was true, but his main reason was to confirm the power of a person who had a hidden class like him. Tisung was drinking the wine when he replied that he already knew he had a hidden class, but was shocked when he realized what Wu Jin had just said. He asked Wu Jin to repeat himself. Wu Jin confirmed that he had heard right, he was also a hidden class like Tisung. Tisung knew Wu Jin wasn't just an ordinary guy, but he was still surprised to learn there was another hidden class besides him. He then asked Wu Jin if that meant he knew about him because he was a hidden class too. Wu Jin used the money sign and told him that he had figured it out, and as he knew, hidden classes weren't all powerful. Tisung agreed, yet told Wu Jin that it was strangely annoying. Wu Jin then reassured him that he didn't need to worry about his information at all because, as he had said before, even in reality, he could tell Tisung was special. No one else knew except him, and even those Genesis guys, who Tisung was so wary of, wouldn't know anything about him being a disciple of Deus. Tisung was pissed upon hearing this and asked who was scared of those guys. He then asked Wu Jin what hidden class he was in and if it wasn't cheating that only he knew everything about him. Wu Jin replied that he couldn't tell him because Tisung was still too weak to handle the information. Angrily, Tisung asked if Wu Jin was going to keep doing this, but Wu Jin just told him to get stronger until he could tell him everything with peace of mind. He said Tisung had to live up to the name of a disciple of Deus. The next day, he logged in, and Hamji, who was eating a snack, greeted him cheerfully. He asked Hamji if he was right that he hadn't caused any trouble while he was away. Hamji laughingly replied that he wasn't a troublemaker like his master. Hamji then asked him if he wrapped things up well in the other realm. He replied that he wasn't sure because, in the end, things with Chen Wu Jin just sort of wrapped up without much discussion afterward. He then remembered Wu Jin telling him that they should meet again when he reached level 200, making him wonder what the deal was with that sneaky Wu Jin and what his intention was. He thought that it didn't seem Wu Jin's goal was just to make connections with other hidden classes. When Hamji noticed him being silent, he asked him why he came to that place, saying that the shady and seedy place didn't suit someone like him. Hamji then teasingly asked him if he was feeling frustrated, making him ask Hamji what a lewd hamster was saying and tell him that it wasn't that kind of place. He explained that he was in the city of pleasure called Dondajiri, known for its abundance of adult content such as bars, gambling dens, and other adult entertainment venues within BNW. It was famous for allowing players to experience all kinds of pleasures in virtual reality, but he came there for the underground market. He then told Hamji that he didn't plan on staying there for long. After selling the items he got at the underground market and upgrading his gear, he would move to another area, making Hamji tell him that it was so boring. He then stopped walking when he noticed something and realized that the men in front of him were from Genesis. He was frustrated that those prestigious guild bastards were causing trouble even in a place like this and were still up to their trashy antics. He wanted to confront them right away but decided against it. Hamji teasingly asked him what was wrong and if he felt intimidated. But he just asked Hamji who'd be intimidated and if he avoided dung because it was scary. He then told Hamji that the answer was no, they avoid it because it is dirty. He walked past them, telling Hamji that they were someone they'd step on someday, but now was just not the right time and they should sell the items quickly. One of the Genesis men asked the old man if he had heard all the rumors, saying that they heard he had something good and wanted to check it out. However, the old man wouldn't listen to them and kept silent. The other Genesis member stopped his comrade, saying that even after several looks, Something seemed fishy and the rune of insight wasn't working properly, making him wonder if the old man wasn't suspiciously strong. But the first man just told his comrade that he was just scared, always getting beaten up by Chialgi, and asked what if that old man's level was higher. The man then proudly reminded his comrade that they were from Genesis and if the old man messed with them, it would be a war with Genesis. He told his comrade to look around and see that no matter what nonsense they spewed, nobody was stopping them and no one could stand in their way. The man then put his finger on the old man and asked if he was actually too scared to speak, but then someone punched the man in the face, making him slam into the things piled up nearby. He then told the men that this was it, they were really pissing him off with that scared talk. He furiously shouted at them, saying they claimed they weren't scared. The other man grabbed his sword from his inventory while stutteringly asking if he couldn't see their uniform, telling him that they were from Genesis. He just punched the man, replying that this was why he hated them even more. The two Genesis guys then collapsed, and he said that those men were nothing without their guild name, yet they were making a fuss. Hamji laughingly told him that it looked like he couldn't hold back after all. He angrily told Hamji that if only someone hadn't kept scratching beside him, he would have endured. Hamji, who was afraid, replied that it looked itchy, so he just scratched it. He then told the old man not to worry too much because those men were naturally like that. But the old man kept silent, making him wonder if the old man really couldn't speak. As they walked away, Hamji asked if Genesis was really a big guild and how he was going to handle the aftermath. He replied that it wasn't a PvP worth recording, and they probably wouldn't even dare speak up after getting beaten up and leaving. He then told Hamji that they would just leave after selling their items and doing maintenance, feeling refreshed because it had been a while since he deceived Genesis without noticing the old man peeking at him from behind. A moment later, at the Intervention Hotel Dondajiri branch, he walked inside while the system showed that he had entered the training ground exclusive to the Intervention Hotel. He was amazed that it was so spacious, and Hamji excitedly told him that it looked so small from the outside, but it was so big. He explained that it was a service created for adventurers' maintenance and training, and although the fee was a bit expensive, it was worth it. He then told Hamji to do it, and Hamji jumped off his shoulder, replying that he knew it without him saying. Hamji then retrieved his infinite bag and opened it while falling to the floor. He asked Hamji if he had to make so much noise when he took something out, but Hamji just told him not to underestimate the moment when his body shines. Hamji asked him if he was right that his main weapon was supposed to be a one-handed blunt, and why he bought other weapons too. He replied that it was because it was the cheapest and simplest to use, but it was not his main weapon. He knew it was time to choose when the notification showed him that he was about to reach level 50, so he should select his main weapon. He knew that there were 5 types of weapons available for the Debuff Master, including the blunt. The other 4 were Spear Mastery, Gauntlet Mastery, and Greatsword Mastery, but he preferred to stick with the blunt weapon he used before. Yet, he knew he should try out some other options as well. He then summoned his Shadow Boxer, a special kind of sandbag with fixed defense and infinite health. He grabbed a shield and started testing it. He headed to the Shadow Boxer with a shield and launched an attack with the shield tip, which pierced the Shadow Boxer. He noticed that the destructive power wasn't bad, but the damage per second was too low, as he only inflicted 5,400 damage. He then grabbed the sword and positioned himself with it to attack the Shadow Boxer. A few hours later, Hamji, who was yawning, asked him how long he was going to keep at it, telling him that it had already been 2 hours. He had used all the weapons and was exhausted. He noticed that everything was ambiguous and every weapon had its pros and cons, but none stood out as particularly good. He then thought he'd stick with the familiar and reliable one-handed blunt weapon. But then the old man appeared behind him and told him that it was all pointless. He looked back and saw it was the old man from earlier, wondering how he got in when he was in a private training facility and if it was Chen Wu Jin again. He asked the old man who he was and if he was from the Guardians or if that annoying Wu Jin sent him. The old man just asked him back why he helped him and noted that he didn't ask for any reward either. He asked the old man what he was talking about, but then the old man shouted at him to just speak up, which surprised him. He kept quiet for a moment and then replied that it was not because he felt sorry for him, but seeing an old man not being able to resist people stronger than him reminded him of his past. He just didn't want to keep running away from his past anymore. The old man laughingly told him that it was a concise but solid reason, making him confused. The old man then threw his hat away while introducing himself as Shakiro, and told him that from now on, he would make him stronger. He then saw that Shakiro was an NPC with a level of 354. His title was Weapon Master, and he was one of the 5-star heavens. Well guys, that's the end.
Thank you for watching. That's it for today. Meet you in the next video.